crime that's going on in government and politicians that are making sketchy deals to make their companies money and crony capitalism. But another aspect of systemic tabloidism is, while pushing people to just write clickbait, they also have realized they can only they can slander people, and slander makes them more money, and the more money they make, they have more money to defend from slander suits. But they can only slander people of a certain class. Because otherwise, if you slander someone like Hulk Hogan, who can afford to make a sustained court case against you, your whole outlet will shut down.
Didn't Hulk Hogan say, Hulk Hogan said oh my God. I'm sorry, but I need to look this up quick.
Have lots of eyeballs on them, but don't have the same amount of money, and just happen to be in direct competition with the mainstream media, which is YouTubers.
They did Titus O'Neil dirty recently.
Of all of their slander, harassment, saying we're horrible bigots, we're ruining politics.
That was terrible. I can't believe they did Titus O'Neil like that at WrestleMania. That was terrible.
It's about money.
Oh my God.
We can't shut down.
They did that to Titus. My man Titus, no.
YouTuber's salary, you'd have to pay 3 years of it to go with the defamation case. And we need to address that. We need to address these problems.
Yeah, of course.
I agree. I am not this hardcore, we need to have...
You don't get it? Titus O'Neil was famous for saying the N-word.
Free market where you can sell babies heroin and have them working in your,
of course,
bauxite mine for $2 an hour.
Yeah, of course. I feel like this was a bit of a departure from what I was talking about, but I feel like where you moved into, we have, but it's fun. But I feel like this goes back to the political disaffection. People are being sold what sells. And it's mostly not serious political issues.
Hulk Hogan is not black. Titus O'Neil is black. Since Hulk Hogan said the N-word
in China right
kind of weird they paired him up with Titus O'Neil.
Most people probably don't, because that kind of news doesn't sell. So that's what I'm talking about when I say that I want to fight against political disaffection. I feel like that's a huge problem.
Why do you guys not attack the media, who have been such a problem in this? This has been a completely largely, if you look at it, the conservatives have been the ones that have been battling with the...
What is Bitcoin's utility and the value of Bitcoin? What is the price that it should be traded at? Well, we're here to discuss these topics with three very prominent guests, experts in their respective fields with various viewpoints. Dr. Saifedean Ammous, independent educator at saifedean.com, who is also the author of The Bitcoin Standard, Hong Feng, CEO of OKCoin, and Steve Hanke, professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University. Gentlemen and lady, welcome to the show. And Dr. Ammous, it's your first time. Welcome to Kitco.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
It should be a fun discussion about Bitcoin. I know you have all very good opinions and viewpoints on how people should perceive Bitcoin and the role that it plays for investors. I like to start with Bitcoin's utility and its intrinsic value, because that is a foundation of this discussion. Hong, ladies first. You have written an essay about this very topic and why you think Bitcoin should reach $100,000. Is that still your price target, Hong?
Short term, yes. Yes, absolutely. Okay. So when I think it's interesting when you mention intrinsic value and the keyword utility. I think those two are very important to understand when we talk about a quote unquote an asset class. To me, Bitcoin is a very special asset class. It's not just a asset class, because when we talk about asset class in the traditional financial world, it is a asset class that it's a type of asset that generates certain cash flow or be valued in fiat money, i.e. US dollar or any other fiat money that you can speak of. But Bitcoin, to me, is not falling into that category. It is this very special asset class that actually provide the essential utility as a best that we have as a store of value, the best store of value that we have ever had in the human history. That is what makes it very special. I think we talked about this previously on your show. The reason that Bitcoin is very special and unique, and compared to gold and many others historical store of value format that we've seen historically, it is very scarce, right? It is divisible, it is durable, it is fungible for many other things. But the most important thing about Bitcoin is that it takes out any third-party from the creation and management of this asset, and make it very censorship resistant, make it free from inflation, which has been the most, the biggest, quote unquote, evil, if you will, that has plagued our financial system and our currency system historically. So that's how I've been viewing it compared to many other asset classes out there. It's very special. You cannot think about it as a comparable to stock or bonds or whatsoever, because it shouldn't be think of in that framework.
Okay. I'll let each of you make a statement, and then you'll have a chance to respond to each other. Dr. Amos, you've talked about Bitcoin and how it relates to Austrian economics and its role for investors and economists alike. Can you elaborate on this concept?
Yeah, I think the foundational concept of Austrian economics is the idea that value is subjective, and I think the term intrinsic value makes really no sense in the context of economics. In the context of finance, it's used to denote the value of the discounted expected future cash flows of a cash yielding asset. But that's not, that's different from how we think about value as in economics, because a lot of things don't yield cash flow and they're still valuable. And so the value of anything comes from somebody valuing it. And that is subjective. There's no right and answer over how much a person can value something or they should value something. It is entirely subjective. It is down to the person themselves. So there's no economic value without a human being making the valuation consciously from the scarcity of the good that they're valuing. And so for me, Bitcoin has proven itself to have a value on the market for 12 years, and the market continues to exist liquid in a very liquid form. I can understand how somebody won't see value in Bitcoin for themselves, but I don't understand the idea that we can dismiss a $1 trillion of asset being held by people all over the world as not having value. Well, somebody is holding all of the $1 trillion of Bitcoin that are out there today, and they could be selling it, and they could be buying things, and they could be buying a lot of things for $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin, but they choose to hold the Bitcoin. So there clearly is value from it, from holding Bitcoin. And that's I think what economists should be asking themselves. Why? Okay,
excellent. And Professor Hanke, last time we spoke about Bitcoin a few weeks ago, you made the rounds of the internet by saying that, I quote, Bitcoin's fundamental value should be zero and it's going to eventually death spiral down to its fundamental value. Can you elaborate on this view?
Well, first of all, I did say that, and the fundamental value of something is very different from the market value. The only objective value of anything is the market value, and the market value is, as a good Austrian, I can conclude the summation of the subjective valuations of the market participants who are engaged in buying and selling whatever it is in the market to determine its objective market price. So these are just classifications and terminologies that are used in economics. So the market value of Bitcoin is what, 55,000 today or something around that. I haven't looked the last hour, so it moves around. What do you have there, David? Do you have it on the computer?
Yeah, something like that.
It's something around 55,000. That is the market price. That is the objective value, and that is determined by subjective valuations of market participants. And that's clear enough. The fundamental value of something is, and at the limit, whether it's generating either utility of some sort or free cash flow. A stock, we value that by looking at its free cash flow or projection of that, and that's added together by all the analysts, all their subjective valuations, and they're buying and selling and recommending, and ultimately you get a market price, which is the objective value. I think the reason that I think this is the fundamental value is important to keep in mind is that there's free entry into the crypto space, and Bitcoin I think has inferior characteristics to what could be superior cryptos that will eventually drive it out of the marketplace. And when that happens, the supply is completely inflexible and inelastic, but the demand determines the price. The demand determines the price. And if the demand disappears because people go to superior substitutes, then the price will go down to its fundamental value, which happens to be zero.
Okay. Hong, I'll let you respond to that. Professor Henke made a point that Bitcoin doesn't generate any cash flow, and so that's one of his assumptions for why the fundamental value of this asset is zero, because it doesn't generate cash flow. Do you agree with this statement? Is it true that Bitcoin doesn't generate cash flow?
Yeah, I actually want to respond to Professor Henke's point on several aspects. Professor Henke talked about fundamental value, which I actually agree with. I think when we think about a price of a future price of a quote unquote asset class, we want to think about what the utility of that asset. Yeah, is it something that generates cash flow and then should be valued in terms of discounted cash flow, or is it something that is more providing utility that's not driving cash flow, but certain utility that people just wanted? As a result of that, the value of that should be put in the framework of a supply and demand framework. And I think in Bitcoin's case, it is the latter, right? It's not generating cash flow. It is a supply demand play. It is the best store of value, so that if many people, depending on how many people actually see it as the best store of value, when that size of the population changes, the supply and demand dynamics changes that will drive the change of the price. Now, what I do believe in is that when you look at Bitcoin versus all the other competitors out there as a store of value, either historically or in fiat world or in crypto world, there's no other asset or whatever format that you can think of that offer more superior attributes than Bitcoin. So the second point that intrigued me in Professor Henke's comment just now is that when he mentioned the supply and demand and acknowledged the change of supply and demand will drive the price of Bitcoin, he mentioned that there may be other assets in crypto world that may come up with more superior attributes that may drive Bitcoin out of this competition. And I don't agree with that, at least not now. I don't see any other assets that in crypto that can actually offer more than what Bitcoin can offer at this point. There have been forks out of Bitcoin, but those failed. And the other thing is, when you think about store of value, when you think about the consensus forming around that, and ultimately as a monetary network, there is a significant network effect there. Depending, because back to Professor Saifedean's comment, it's almost like a game theory. When you think about it's either historically gold or silver or any other project commodity as serving as store of value, or Bitcoin serving as store of value. It depends on how you think other people will think of this as a potential lasting, durable store of value. And there is a network effect. And the longer Bitcoins play out, the larger the networks becomes in the total market cap, the harder for the competitor to come up and challenge it. It has to be not just 2 times better, not just 10 times better, it has to be 100 times better, just like what Bitcoin has been doing with fiat currency, with gold. It is 100 times better. It is a native internet money, native store of value to the internet. That's what makes it so special. And it takes out government, central banks hand totally like like absolute separation of money and state. That's what makes it so special.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Dr. Emmers, I have a question for you, but before I let you, before I ask you the question, I'd like to give Steve a chance to just respond directly to Hong's comments.
Well, the one thing that there are a number of things that could be said, but the main thing is there's 7 characteristics of great currencies, and Bitcoin just doesn't fit the bill. If you go back, I studied these things, the dominant currencies for 2,500 years. There have been 14 great currencies, and the network effects are very important, obviously. The average length of life of each one of these is about 200 years. Well, Bitcoin hasn't been around long enough to say anything about its store of value. So that assertion is kind of ridiculous on the face of it. The one thing that we do know is that gold, there is something called the golden constant. Roy Jostrom's book is titled The Golden Constant. And from 1560 up until the present, gold has been something that holds its purchasing power over long periods of time. There are variations and volatilities, but if you look at the ratio of wholesale prices over the price of gold price, the gold price, it's about 1. That thing stays pretty constant over hundreds of years. So we have a long test there when we're talking about store of value, holding purchasing power. Gold has in fact stood the test of time. Now, what are these 7 characteristics? Well, one is the size of the transactions domain. And the size of the transactions domain for Bitcoin is tiny. It's not used for anything. This is a pure speculative asset. You have to look at the greater fool's theory of speculation to figure out what's going on. And that is, you can buy it today. Its value is what it is. And if you think it's going higher, you buy. If you think it's going lower, you would sell the thing short. So where it's going, no one really knows. I have no idea where the thing. Hong might be exactly right. It's going to 100,000 per unit in the short run. But the second thing that is required out of these 7 characteristics, stability of monetary policy. 3, absence of any kind of controls. 4, strength of the issuing state, because all of great currencies have actually been issued by states. And 5, until 1971, there was always a fallback factor. In other words, the great currency was issued, but it could be convertible, usually into gold or silver in some cases. And the 6th thing is that there's some sense of permanence. In other words, you can price deferred payments or long-term contracts in whatever this is. It has to be a unit of account that's reliable. And as a result of that, interest rates are low when denominating contracts in these things. So all of these normal things that have been associated with every great currency for the last 2,500 years, you just can't check the box on Bitcoin. It just doesn't have it.
Okay.
It is a speculative asset, and you have to think in terms of a speculative asset in which the greater fool's theory is the name of the game. And you're talking about something like the South Sea bubble or the Mississippi bubble of 300 years ago in the 1720s. That's what's going on. It might go a lot higher.
Okay.
It might go a lot lower. And by the way, I can design a superior crypto.
We're going to talk about that in just 1 second, Dr. Hankey, your alternative crypto. Dr. Amos, let's give you a chance to respond. So I guess 2 questions now. First of all, Hong and Professor Hankey have both given their targets for what Bitcoin should be trading at. What is your fundamental value target? Is there one for you?
David, I don't have a target. This is a speculative asset that I have absolutely no target about. But as superior alternatives come in, and they will, entry is very easy. Forget the networking thing. Entry is very easy. If you come up with a superior one, the demand for Bitcoin will dry up, and it'll go down to almost nothing.
Okay, I see. Dr. Amos, your response?
Well, my question is, we've already had 12 years of supposedly superior alternative coming on and entering the market. There are thousands of digital currencies other than Bitcoin. not only have they failed to replace Bitcoin, they've also all failed at getting to 10% of Bitcoin's liquidity size. I think that there's no comparison between Bitcoin and other digital currencies in any meaningful sense. They've failed to challenge it at all, and Bitcoin has just been continuously growing for 12 years at 200%. So the question that I have here is, there comes a point at which Bitcoin is bigger than the US dollar. There comes a point at which Bitcoin is bigger than the global bond market. If more people have money in Bitcoin than the bond market, imagine $100 trillion being held in Bitcoin. Currently we're at 1 trillion, but imagine it goes up another 100-fold. That is probably bigger than the global bond market. Now, it doesn't have to satisfy your textbook definitions of what makes a great currency, because that refers to the currencies of governments issued in the analog world. It has to win the test of the market, and you have to think about it as a market good out there competing for people buying it. So if more people buy it and we end up with more people holding Bitcoin than government bonds, doesn't matter if it fulfills your criteria in your textbook, it's already become a store of value bigger than bonds. So my question to Professor Hanke is, if it goes up to $5 million of Bitcoin, it's bigger than the bonds. Would you then consider that, okay, maybe it has a little bit of value itself to the $100 trillion worth of, to the people holding $100 trillion worth of it?
If it's $100 billion and that's the market value, that's what it's worth. There's no question about it. All I'm saying, and you're missing the point in these definitions, it is not a currency, period. That's the end of the story. I haven't listed all 14. I'm not going to go back to the Greeks and go through every currency. I was talking about great currencies, great international currencies that satisfy the definition of a currency. I wasn't talking about a speculative asset. And if the price goes up and the value exceeds the total value of all bonds outstanding in the world, that is the value of whatever Bitcoin or the crypto is. That is the objective value. That's the point.
Would you still think the fundamental value is zero?
Pardon?
Would you still say the fundamental value is zero?
Yeah, unless there's some uses that ultimately show up and the thing starts being used for
something. Buy $100 trillion worth of Bitcoin. There's 7 billion people around the world holding $100 trillion worth of Bitcoin. That sounds pretty useful to me. They must have a reason for holding it.
No, they do. They're speculating. It's a speculative market and a speculative asset.
You say that like it's a bad word, but everything you do is speculation.
I'm not saying it's like it's a bad word. I think speculation is a wonderful word. I spent most of my career speculating in foreign exchange and commodities, equities, and bonds. So I don't need lessons on whether speculation's good or bad.
Dr. Amos, I'd like to draw your attention to a comment that Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has recently made this week in his testimony. He said that crypto assets are highly volatile and therefore not useful as a store of value. He said it is a speculative asset that is essentially a substitute for gold rather than for the dollar. What assumptions is Fed Chair Jerome Powell making here, and do you agree with his statement?
I think, he's probably correct to the extent of his own preference. He seems to prefer currencies that lose value steadily over time with general predictability to currencies that gain value with some volatility. And I think, there are different flavors of ice cream in the world, and there are different kinds of currencies. And the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that it's now offering us a free market test. We're watching all those national currencies built on the idea that they need to lose value every couple of years to stimulate the economy growth. We're watching them up against a currency that gains value. So, Powell is welcome to hold whichever he wants. But I think, the market shows Bitcoin has appreciated 200% on average every year over the last 10 years. I think, Professor Hankey and Professor Powell need to be asking themselves a little bit more about what is it that people see in this thing? Why has it not been displaced by all the other cryptocurrencies? And I think the point that I'd like to make to Professor Hankey is when you were mentioning the specifications of a great currency, Bitcoin effectively has one that substitutes for most of them, which is the fact that nobody controls it. Nobody can change the supply. It's been 12 years, it's $1 trillion, and nobody has figured out a way to make more Bitcoin, more than what is originally scheduled. So this is the first thing that is truly scarce. And this is what distinguishes Bitcoin from the other currencies, because none of them has demonstrated the degree of immutability that Bitcoin has, which assures everybody in Bitcoin that they can be 100% certain almost that there's never going to be more Bitcoin made. You can't get that kind of security from any of the other networks. And I think this is a very, very important point about what gives Bitcoin value.
Dr. Amos, I have one more follow-up question for you. You're currently living in Lebanon, where you experience and can observe very high levels of inflation. Now, if I were to present to you options for hedging inflation, let's say gold, Bitcoin, stocks, government-issued bonds, for example, what would be your preferred instrument to protect yourself from inflation with?
I mean, well, I'm not living in Lebanon anymore, but my preferred instrument would be Bitcoin, because I think, the important characteristics of money, the important characteristic of money is saleability. It's the degree to which you can sell it without losing its value. And I think in Bitcoin's case, there are two parameters for saleability: saleability across time, the ability of money to hold on to its value across time, and saleability across space, the ability to move money across space. And I think Bitcoin wins hands down compared to fiat currencies and gold in that regard. Its ability to hold on to value across time is very good, and it's outstanding. It's 1% appreciation a year, but it's also very cheap to send halfway across the world. And this is when people start talking about Bitcoin not having utility. You can send money from the US to China in a couple of hours without having to use any of the national government infrastructure institutions like the central bank. This is an enormous advantage, which places in Lebanon, they're beginning to see the value of that, because the dollar might be great and it's more acceptable in Bitcoin in a place like Lebanon, but you can't send the dollar abroad because the banks won't let you. The banks are closed, there's capital controls, there's all kinds of problems. Bitcoin gets around that.
Well, on Lebanon, David, let me just make a remark, because it's something I follow hour by hour. Actually, in the last year, the Lebanese pound has shed 81% of its value. And today, I just measured the inflation rate. It's 378% per year. They are hyperinflating. They started hyperinflating in July. But this gets to the point about Bitcoin versus the dollar and use and utility. Everyone wants what in Lebanon? They want dollars. Everyone around the world does. And this is utility. Almost all commodities traded in the world are invoiced and priced in dollars. 40% of all trade, manufacturers, commodities, everything else, are priced in dollars. 60% of all central bank reserves are in dollars. 90% of every foreign exchange transaction has a dollar on one side of the trade. So in terms of use and use value, the dollar is the great currency. It is the international currency. All this Bitcoin talk, it's a minor footnote in terms of utility and use.
There must be a price at which you would have to, if you think it's small, then you have to be able to name a price at which you would admit it's no longer small, it's no longer a footnote, because it is much bigger than it was last year in Lebanon. It's not as big as the dollar yet, but it's much bigger than what it was last year. So if the trend continues, at what level would you admit that this is just something that people can use? It works. It does what it says on the tin. You can send it across the world and it maintains the supply.
It takes time. When Elon Musk first started to invent electricity car, people in the traditional auto industry think that was just a joke, a footnote. But now Tesla is the most valuable auto company in the world. So it takes time. And when the paradigm shifts, it comes slowly and then suddenly.
I'd like to ask Professor Hankey to specify price at which Bitcoin becomes big enough for him to stop saying it has one.
Well, you just measure the measurements that I've given you, the dimensions that I've given you.
So Bitcoin's
in other words, how many commodities? When are we going to start pricing oil in Bitcoin? When are we pricing corn? When are we pricing wheat? Okay, that's a commodities. When are we going to start pricing cars and manufactured goods in Bitcoin? You're talking about the speculative aggregate moving this thing around. I'm talking about the uses of it in transactions.
It is actually being used in transactions, Dr. Hankey. It's probably just not as visible to us in US than to other people living in different regimes where inflation is is taking away their health. For example, in Latin America, there are a lot of commercial entities in their export business. For example, with Asia, selling commodities to Asia, they transact in Bitcoin.
This is an academic footnote. The dollar dominates all of these transactions.
Yeah, but the British pound dominated at some point, and it doesn't anymore just because it doesn't.
That's exactly my point about entry of a competitor, a superior competitor, and the U.S. dollar became superior after World War I and drove the British pound sterling to the sidelines. I think, as someone who, embraces the idea of digital currencies, which I do, and I think that is the future in cryptos, the question is, what kind of superior product would be desirable? And I think a currency board type crypto would be. Now, Facebook with Libra tried this, but they had no one on the team obviously understood currencies very well and how these things work. It turns out I've established 4 currency boards in my life. One in Estonia in 1992. They didn't even have a constitution that had been approved yet in June of 1992. We established what? We established the Estonian krone with a currency board backed 100% with reserves. We did the same thing in Lithuania in 1994. We did the same thing in Bulgaria in 1997 when they were facing a raging hyperinflation with monthly inflation peaking out at 242% a month. We installed a currency board. And Bosnia and Herzegovina, wiped out by civil war in 1997 in August, we established the currency board. All these things work. There are no preconditions. The currency board does issue a liability. That's whatever the local currency or whatever you call it. It could be private currency. I'm advocating now private currency boards. So you issue a liability, and that liability is backed with 100% reserves of some anchor asset, and the local asset or asset issued by the currency board trades at a fixed exchange rate that's freely convertible with no restrictions to the anchor. And that's the points. They're out there. They don't work. They haven't been audited. They've had all kinds of problems. And that's precisely why they have not been able to nudge. They have reduced the market share of Bitcoin, but they haven't really been able to put it out of the market and compete. They're very inferior. And we had a stillbirth with the Libra. The Libra white paper actually did mention the words currency board, but it was a false start. It was properly done. And I think if one was done right, or others were done right, they could be very competitive with Bitcoin and would in fact be superior, actually.
I have a few more questions. I will let you talk about other forms of cryptocurrencies, but Dr. Amos, let's talk about Bitcoin standard. So a currency regime backed by cryptocurrencies, is this possible? Could it happen?
I think so. I think Professor Hank is stuck at the mental hurdle of thinking of currency purely within the nation-state central bank paradigm. And I think I'd love him to just make the leap of imagining that we've gotten software now that gets around the central bank, gets around the need for a currency board, and just establishes market value, allows market value to accumulate into a free market good that is controlled by nobody. So it's not a good that is physical, it is digital. But if I take your computer right now and I return it to the same physical form, but I erase all files of it, that won't have the same value for you, that computer, right? It's still physically the same, but the digital stuff on it is where you have value. So we can attach value to digital things. What Bitcoin does is that it allows us to replace the bottom layer of central banking and central banks and currency boards with a protocol that is set in digital stone, effectively, and has demonstrated incredible credibility in maintaining its supply and in maintaining the integrity of the network over 12 years. So the question then becomes, you don't need a currency board for Bitcoin because it would defeat the entire point, because then you have a bunch of people control it, and those people can abuse the authority because they can always issue more liabilities than they have. Bitcoin prevents that possibility entirely. Instead, what you're going to be getting is Bitcoin replacing the currency boards and the central banks, and then we're going to build second layer solutions like the stable coins and like the currency boards and like commercial banking backed by the Bitcoin base layer.
Okay.
Well, what you say about the currency board, it really isn't right. That's technically, you've got things all mixed up. The currency board is not a central bank. It's something completely different. And you can have, by the way, what I've been advocating, and that is a gold-backed currency board with gold as the anchor. Now, who issued the liability of gold? Who's issuing that? Whose liability is gold? It's nobody's.
Because I think there are a couple of things that we have discussed back and forth, but I would like to actually go back to almost like take a first principle mentality. And Dr. Hanke, I commend you on your track record of setting up a currency board historically and making that valuable to the people in those countries that have suffered superinflation. One question I would like to ask you to think about, is why would the currency board succeed, right, compared to some of those local currencies? And also, when you talk about the list of good currency standards for a good currency or solid currency, I heard that you mentioned something that I think is very interesting and actually crucial. You mentioned something that's called monetary policy stability. I think that is really important. That is actually the key point. When Paolo was talking about Bitcoin's volatility, I think he's mixing up with the price volatility and the monetary policy stability. I think whenever we talk historically, when people around the world who have been chosen gold as the store of value historically before sovereign currency came up, that's because gold is more predictable, right? That level of predictability in its monetary policy is what is driving its success historically. And when you think about all the currency board that has been successful, and they have been successful because they have been more predictable than those local currencies issued by local central banks who have no discipline in their monetary policy. It is totally unpredictable.
Professor Hanke talked about superior forms of cryptocurrencies that could one day dethrone Bitcoin and drive the price down. Do these currencies already exist? Are there alternative coins out there that you see fitting this definition?
No. There is no superior form currently that is more superior than Bitcoin, that is more predictable, that is verifiable. Actually, Dr. Hanke was talking about the potentially creating a currency board that is more superior than Bitcoin, maybe pegging against gold. How verifiable is that? Bitcoin is a network that is P2P, that's sensitive, censorship resistant. Anyone, if you are interested in setting up a node and check it out, you can verify it. It's verifiable to everyone in the world. Right? How can that be done for gold? You have to have a third party running the reserve, checking it, and have then invite other third parties like auditors and legal counsels to verify that. There are a lot of potential points of failure in that process. But in Bitcoin, there's no single point of failure. That is what has been making it super exciting and different and unique and superior to all the other alternatives that we have in our traditional mindset. And again, I agree with Dr. Safedin on the comment that when you're talking about the currency criteria, those are currencies issued by government, issued by central banks. But that's an assumption. That's not a given. Like in our history of monetary usage for human beings, not all the civilizations are using currency issued by central banks, issued by the government. Gold for a long time is not issued by any government or bank. It was later taken by the government as kind of the reserve and asked people not to use it other than being a reserve. Right?
Well, I remember we had private banking. The unit of account was something that was indicated or established by government, but the issue of private money was very common. So what you're saying is just not correct. Well, there was a lot of private money and private issue.
Those private monies are issued by third parties, by individuals, either individual person or individual organization. In Bitcoin's case, no third party has been issuing it or controlling the supply or managing the management of it. It's all run on
the action system. I want to hear your opinion on this later, Joe Lewis, but we'll first hit up KTM.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unrealistic for people to, and I sort of kind of think it's unrealistic for people to think that this is going to change everything all in one step, win or lose. Once again, I said it earlier, I'll say it again. This is just one little piece of a bunch of stuff that has to happen. You know what I mean? It's not, this one case isn't going to make everyone start acting right. It isn't going to make people stop profiling. It's not going to make, police officers treat you with more respect. It's not going to, it might make one jurisdiction make some new rules, make some new laws. It might make another jurisdiction follow suit, but it's not going to change. It's actually going to even give a backlash in some jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions, they're going to say, oh, okay, like we love our police. And there are some lawmakers statewide and federal who are like, no, we love our police, and this case is indicative of like how we should do things. We're going to actually, push harder against it. So yeah, I think it's unrealistic, but again, I think it shouldn't, unrealistic or not, it shouldn't be, just keep pushing.
Okay, let's go to Lyra.
Okay, so the goal with like all of this is for people to stop dying at the hands of the police unjustly. Honestly, anyone who dies at the hand of police will most times be unjust because police can't be judge, jury, and executioner. But the whole goal with all of this, why we have the George Floyd Act, why we had all these protests, why we have so much writing on this conviction, is because that we want the output is to be that less people die. We want people to stop dying injustly, period. But I mean, world's not perfect, but at the very least, we want as few people to die in the future going forward from this. And so like with this case, we want to set a good example in that respect. So I also want to talk a little bit about the litmus test and precedents. Is like, as we talked about earlier, you know, I'm not a lawyer. Legal precedents, I don't know all the nuances, ins and outs that. Hopefully Joe will be able to enlighten us a little bit more. So admittedly, what I'm about to say is largely philosophical. But the litmus test, it's not, I don't see the litmus test as this is where we mark the turning point. After this case happens, everything will change. Whatever the conviction is, there will still be people who will die unjustly. There will be some police officer who justice is brought to, but then there will also be police officers who get off the hook, whichever way that this case goes. But the point of a litmus test is to test progress against the way. You don't just have one litmus test, you keep having them, and you keep having them with Rodney King, Trayvon Martin, now George Floyd, later Ahmaud Arbery, hopefully soon. We keep having this litmus test because the whole point is that we are testing how far progress is coming. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes to make sure I don't get lost in my things. So like the point of a litmus test is that we keep having it to test the progress of our society and also of our legal jurisdiction. Obviously nothing, we can't expect. I don't think anyone here thinks that once, like if Derek Chauvin gets convicted, all of a sudden everything will change. Everything will magically get better, because we all know that it won't. But the whole point is that we are testing it along the way. And we want this litmus test to have a good example, because I do not want to see the fallout that will happen if Derek Chauvin gets off. I do not want to see the chaos that will ensue when police officers look at this case and go, wow, I can just kneel on somebody's neck for 10 minutes and get off. I could just get away with that. And like, even if Derek Chauvin hopefully gets convicted, there's still going to be police officers to do it. But this is we don't want the fallout to happen from Derek Chauvin losing this indictment, losing this conviction, because we have this litmus test to test progress. And if we lose this test, if we fail this test, the fallout that will ensue after it, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a more emboldened police officers go out and kill. Like, listen, legislation, I know it's the most important, but legislation comes after the person is already dead. And the whole point is that we want less deaths to happen in the first place. So that's where, like, the optics of these cases matter, because, okay, if we pass legislation and we don't, like, make all these cases as visible as they are, a police officer will unjustly shoot a person of color, and like they may be sent to jail after, but them getting sent to jail doesn't bring that person back. We still have all these people who are dying in the process. But on the other hand, before they pull that trigger, if they think back to Derek Chauvin, maybe they'll think twice. And like, I agree that legislation in the long run does a lot more, but the whole point is for people to stop dying. We want as few people to die. And like, law is only half of the battle, because you can pass these legislations, but people are still dead.
Lyra,
I still think it's
Lyra. I already said it before, right? How many times these cases, right? It's not, again, Derek Chauvin is a special case, especially dangerous. Hold on, I just gotta say. I know. No. I don't think you do, because it's a special case where this guy once again took his time to murder this man. Right, granted. But most of these cases, right? So many of these cases are split-second decisions by the police, right? And then in the end, they'll say like, well, I felt threatened, right? And you know what? They might be telling the truth because of the implicit bias, right? So within that moment, right, when they are deciding like, am I going to kill this person or I'm not going to kill this person, right? They're not going to be thinking about Derek Chauvin or anything else, right? This will be like the culmination of all of their upbringing, of their training, and how society views these things in general. They all interact in that split second, and then they'll pull the trigger. Or they're not pull the trigger. This case being important is I don't want to give them any more reason to. But I'm saying, but that. Okay, well, I guess we just disagree on how this works. That's fine.
Okay, but I also wasn't finished, because you keep talking about how important legislation is, and yes, legislation is important, but like as Fidak said earlier, it's only half the battle. Because another thing that she said was like, okay, Derek Chauvin gets off, but what if these next three police officers, they don't get off? Well, what about the other way? What if we get the legislation that we get the George Floyd Act? And yet police officers are still getting off on these case-by-case basis because of little nuances. Oh, well, technically this and that and the third happened. So, we should still let this police officer keep their job, even though we have these legislations in place. That's why the litmus test is still important. Even if we do get that legislation, the litmus test is still important because we still need to be constantly testing. We need to be constantly, even if we get the legislation, that doesn't, you're saying that we're working with the assumption that the verdict of this case will change how police officers treat people of color moving forward. Well, I would argue that you are assuming that when we get legislation, that will change how police officers move forward, because there are chokeholds that have been banned and they still do the chokeholds. So the legislation, it's only half the battle. I think they're both important. I don't agree that only legislation is important and cases mean nothing. They're both are clearly important.
So I didn't say only legislation is important, right? I say
cases don't matter at all.
No, hold on.
And I don't agree.
Hold on. Okay. So what I will say, and maybe I'll say this. I'll say that in Fanatic has said this before, right? It's like enforcement is important, right? So like of the law, saying nothing else changes, right? If Derek Chauvin is convicted on the laws that are already on the books, that is a good thing, right? That shows that we are actually taking the laws on the books seriously. Like that it will actually enforce the laws. Like if you break these laws, then you'll be punished for those. So that's a good thing, right? So that's to your point. That's a good thing. On the other hand, that yes, it's not just legislation. There's lots of things that have to change for society. Like legislation alone won't dismantle systemic racism. Like that's just one part of it, right? So court cases can be another part of it as well. But also there's a whole litany of things in society. Attitudes need to change. So there's a lot of things that have to change within us. Institutions have to be demolished, right? There's a whole list of things that have to happen to change policing within our society. I'm saying that like this singular case is not determinative, right? That I feel that many people that this single case isn't determinative in the way that so many people seem to be looking at it. And from what you guys previously, you seem to move your stances here, but what you previously were implying that you felt about it. So that's what I'm saying.
We don't think it's an end-all be-all case either.
Okay, let's go to Fanatic, and then we'll go to Joe.
Yeah, dude, if anyone's moving this goalpost, bro, it's definitely you.
What? I've never changed anything, buddy. I've kept the same thing. I've said the same thing the entire time. Literally the entire time. But sorry, Fanatic, I interrupted you. I apologize.
It's okay. Yeah, like the goalpost move here would be in the fact that you're now shifting it to it's not going to change everything. Like I don't think there's a single person here that said it's going to change everything.
I didn't say that either. I didn't say it either, buddy. I never said that. Please don't. I never said that.
Those words.
I never said it was gonna that you all thought it was going to change everything. I was asking you what.
You said it's not going to change everything. That's what you said. It's not going to change everything.
I said anything, not everything.
Okay, so that's absolutely ridiculous. The idea that it wouldn't change anything whatsoever when we know how like legal precedence happens is just absolutely absurd. But in any case, again, it's absolutely it's actually a litmus test because of the fact that again, even if it changes one small thing, then it's enough. In order for for example, a legal thing that can happen is that as a result of this case, as a result of this trial. Then they go and try him civilly after they're done punishing him criminally. If obviously, it would probably be they wouldn't win that case because of diplomatic immunity. But then that's where
qualified.
I mean, I'm sorry. I always say that. I've been saying that lately. I don't know why. Because of qualified immunity. But as a result of qualified immunity, then what the response to that would be for them to appeal it and run it up the ladder until it eventually gets seen by the Supreme Court, and then that can undo qualified immunity. But typically, the way these things happen is a criminal trial happens first, and then a civil trial happens afterwards, if there's something that they believe to be criminal at all. And so, yeah, I think that this would be one of those steps right there. You keep asking us well, where's the proof of what it's going to change? And I think that's actually absurd. We can't provide proof to you of what is going to change. All we can do is provide speculative ideas about what will change. And that's what I think we've done. At least I feel like I've done a pretty decent job of explaining what we believe possibly can change as a result of this thing. So yeah, I just think these are getting, it's absurd. Like what's his name, Cosmo definitely mention the word like, yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be changing everything. And I think the scope of how much will be changed, I mean, I think that's up for debate, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's seeming kind of silly.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where I really sit on this. Like, we understand. I'm sure you guys talked about how all these problems that we ended up are just an amalgamation of a bunch of things, right? If I had to make a short list of them, it'd be like police practices, underemployment, unemployment, housing, education, social programs, like grievance mechanisms, fucking federal programs, administration of justice, municipal services, like even things that sound unrelated, like consumer practices. And especially governors need to think about that moving forward.
So
of a movie. Matter of fact, I posted in VC chat, Michael Brown's shooting was turned into a play. People are going, we are seeing that after these things happen, culture is looking at these things and they're turning it into forms of like their books, movies, music, conversation. We are doing our due diligence. It may not be happening across the field 100%, but it's happening. So I can't say that when you say nothing is going to change, I have to combat you on that. I understand the sentiment, but that's what I say. When you say nothing is going to change, that's just you being desensitized because we've taken so many L's. You know, that's what I said when I watched.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Rachel Martin.
And
just tell us more about Prince Philip's story and what the British public thought of him.
Yeah, Prince Philip spent his early years actually traveling throughout Europe. He was of royal descent himself, and eventually had gotten to know the royal family, and eventually married Queen Elizabeth. He was known, I think, in different ways in this country over time. People did make fun of him. He was seen as short-tempered. He would tell jokes that were off-color, things that we would now consider, and even years ago, politically incorrect kind of remarks. If you look at the Daily Mirror, a number of newspapers here would carry every year or two, they would say, his 100 most, improper remarks. One was back in '69 when I guess there were some financial questions. He said, well, if we go into the red next year, I'll have to give up polo. And that was one of the more minor ones. That said, there was also a lot of affection for him, and I think respect in the sense that, when you do a job for a very, very long time and you really put your energy into it, people give you a lot of credit for that. He was very dutiful. He did thousands and thousands of royal events supporting the Queen. It was a pretty thankless job in some respects, and not a great job necessarily to have. Today, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, said that we give thanks to him, the nation and the kingdom give thanks to him for an extraordinary life and his extraordinary work.
I always found it interesting that by royal protocol, he actually wasn't supposed to stand next to the Queen. He was always supposed to be a couple steps behind, right?
Yeah, we know that The Crown is fiction, right? The Netflix series, but we also know that some of it is true, and it does. The different actors who portrayed him got at the very frustrating and strange role that he had. And so I think that's probably how a lot of people, certainly in the United States, would be familiar with him.
Right. He was hospitalized in recent weeks. I mean, he was 99, but can you tell us more about his health condition?
Yeah, he had, this is not a surprise. I think that we've all been waiting to see when this might happen because he had been in, I think, for an undisclosed heart condition, and he was very frail. And if people saw pictures of him, he was, remarkable at 99, but still, someone who was clearly very, very late in life.
So what does his death symbolize, do you think, for the royal family in the United Kingdom at this moment?
I think, Rachel, it's the beginning of the end of an era. The Queen is 94, a very robust 94. But it also comes at a time that the monarchy is facing a lot of big challenges, which happen in cycles in this country. Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and the accusations against Prince Andrew, which he denies that he was involved with at least one underage woman. The departure of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to the United States with a whole new business model that challenges kind of the way the monarchy is run. And recently on the Oprah show, talking about accusing the royals, at least one royal, of racism. Now you have an unpopular heir to the throne, Prince Charles. He's not seen very well here. So you have an institution that is arcane in some ways and once again has to figure out a way to remain relevant to this country.
NPR's Frank Langfitt reporting on the passing of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Thank you so much, Frank.
You're very welcome, Rachel.
And we're doing, I
For
feel
years
like
now,
this is, through these trials, this is what we're doing to hold them accountable.
And now more from
Sure, but we would never.
There's other fonts too, but go ahead.
Yeah, but we would never apply this type of logic anywhere else, right? If a man is beating his wife every day, there's only so much that a wife or a woman can do to change their behavior until you have to ask the question, like, when is the problem not me anymore? When do the people who are responsible for protecting me have to actually protect me? And that's where I think that's why I'm talking like the lack of trust, because this is kind of how, not to get too heady here, how neoconservatism is really just like tainted our mind, right? Where it's just like, okay, personal responsibility will lead to good outcomes. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but personal responsibility also extends to the individuals of the United States government from the top down. So at what point, and that's kind of like the sort of like the paradox, right? Where at what point does the personal responsibility of the individual stop and the personal responsibility of the government begins? And I think that for the most part, the people who have to do the most lifting in terms of personal responsibility would be the United States government, and that includes law enforcement.
That's true, but the wife I know, if I don't know my wife, right? If I don't know my husband, and yet he beats me, you do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, right, if I have a relationship with my husband, right, a good relationship, a relationship of respect, you know, I'm having conversations with him. I know I've set boundaries, right? And I'm talking on the social level, because the litmus test is towards race relations, right? This is purely, it encompasses a lot of things, but I'm just trying to attack these on the social element, because I already feel like the courts will have an effect, but that's not their responsibility. If I have a relationship with my cop, right, especially in my community, right, I can't say, and like you said, because it's not like the cops I know are beating me. It's the cops I don't know. So I have a fear of the unknown, the fear of the person I don't know, you know? Sure. And then I'm always looking over my shoulder because I feel like a cop that I haven't built a relationship with. So I agree with you there. I can't hold strangers accountable, but I know that on the individual level, and this is very nuanced, within my own community, within the cops that I do know, I have that relationship built.
Okay.
So I think it just
hold on.
Yeah, Joe.
So let you respond, and then let's try to move on to something else. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it'll leak over into the next topic. Is that, and again, like I'm pretty hardline on this stance, where the United States government has to do a better job on its citizens, and that comes with an understanding that all of these problems that are affecting Black Americans and just ethnic minorities especially is because of lack of action of the United States government. Like, we can't wait for another 20 to 30 years when the Supreme Court decides to have a decent take on social issues for things to kind of get pushed, right? This is even why we're in the conversation of like, well, do we pack the Supreme? Do we have like 13 Supreme judges? It's like, it's an understanding that these systems have had that are just not designed for that, right? I would argue that the Supreme Court is designed just to create precedent of the law, but they're now in this precarious position where their decisions are drastically impacting citizens from the top down. Like we got some of the best gun rights legislation in the Bush administration, and it had nothing to do with anybody writing laws. It just came from just a Supreme Court decision that like clarified what militias are, and that the right to bear arms extends beyond the militia. And the gun owners are like, cool, you can't take our guns now? And it's like, wait, hang on, like we're just setting precedent. But they're like, oh, nope, and you made this fucking decision, and this decision is going to impact a bunch of citizens. I guess to close this a bit is that officers, if there's something that all police officers that could do right now that could really change the relationship with their citizens, is having more open, it's going to sound so libby, but having more open dialogues and a more conscious effort of contributing to their communities that doesn't involve policing in the first place. Now, granted, like it's going to be hard for a lot of areas. Like some areas, it's just going to be straight ACAB front to back. But you have to understand of like, these are people who hate me, and you got to make two decisions. It's either you make every conscious effort to try to make the system better for the people around you, or you just put the badge up. Just drop the badge off and drop the gun. For me, those are the only two options. Either you're actively on the side of individuals who understand that your system is corrupt, or you quit. Like there's none of this like, well, I can be a good cop. It's like, no, being a good cop is actually contributing to your community outside of policing. So like when a George Floyd happens, the people who should be the most upset are law enforcement, because that makes their job exponentially harder. Like no different than the girl Wonder, whatever the fuck her name is, whatever Potter, who I guess decided to Aurora Borealis her way to turn her gun into a taser. But it's like, oh no, the spell doesn't work. And it's like, that's unacceptable, because that makes all cops look bad. And it looks bad. And again, like, I'm not trying to simp for police here, but if I'm an officer and I see someone just like commit an act of misconduct on citizens, it's like, fuck, that ripples into my community, because that wanes trust, because people see more than just me when they see me in uniform.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's move on to something else. So I wanted to know your opinion. The next one we'll cover, but who knows, we'll get to another one afterwards. So I want your opinion, which question you guys want to cover the most, all right? So I'll read topic 2 and topic 3 out, and then you guys will decide which one we do next. Topic 2, infamously, many black parents give their children the talk about how to deal with police encounters. Is this talk beneficial if it leaves the impression in a black child's mind that police are their enemies? And if this talk is beneficial, what would be the message about black police officers? Okay, that's topic 2. Topic 3, at an Illinois high school, a black football player was forced to sit down in a locker room filled with banana peels by his fellow teammates. However, when the police investigated, they found out that many of the perpetrators were also people of color. When anti-black racism is performed by black people, should the response or punishment be any different than when white individuals do it? Does the context of a clearly unwanted hostile racist act change when it's done by someone from that same community? So between those two, topic 2 or topic 3, which one do you want to do? We'll vote. Lyra.
I like both topics.
All right, centrist, got it. But try to get off the fence. I'm just kidding.
Also, I'm mad because I looked at chat and you called me toxic positive. How dare you? Oh. I just realized.
I thought the third topic was supposed to be discussing the comparison between MVCI Ultron and Sentinel, and how MVCI Ultron is a superior robot. But that's what I thought coming in this conversation.
Yeah, that was it. That was the conversation.
Lyra, I didn't call you toxic positive. Are you talking about? I didn't say that to you.
It was in chat.
Yeah, I didn't say that.
Yeah, in chat.
I didn't say that.
In fact, you know, the only people who say the Sentinel is better have never played MVCI in their life.
I responded to you, and you brought up toxic positivity. I didn't write that, and then I said, "Oh, I got you. If you want me to bounce."
Oh, I thought you were saying, "Oh, I got you." Like I was toxically positive.
No.
I was saying,
Lyra, vote.
Right, you know that robot's fucked up.
I was very centrist.
Or 3.
Two. Okay, all right. KTN.
Yeah, it's kind of both tough.
2 or 3? 2 or
3.
3. Got it. Cosmo.
2.
2. All right. Fanatic. Fanatic. I'm not. Does he hear us?
3. Sorry, I didn't
3.
realize I muted.
Okay. All right. Ozzy. Excuse me.
2.
2. All right. Joe.
Dun 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 dun. What's 3 again? Let me read it real quick. Oh, but the COVID vaccine's a bonus topic. I like topic 3.
Oh, great.
I'm a teacher, so we need an enemy.
Great. Thanks, guys. Perfectly fucking split. All right, never mind.
So it's up to you, Prime.
All right.
Up to you.
I'll.
What if we give it to chat? No.
Chat really have a vote in my fucking polls.
No. They can set up a vote in chat.
And then I'll have to read. No, it'll get complicated. I just want to get to it. So let's do topic 3 because we've just spent a long time on police officers. We can cover that next week. Don't worry, I save these things because it's a pain in the ass to come up with these things again. So topic 3, we'll do topic 3, okay? I'll reread it just one more time for everyone. At an Illinois high school, a black football player was forced to sit down in a locker room filled with banana peels by his fellow teammates. However, when the police investigated, they found out that many of the perpetrators were also people of color. So the people who forced his teammates, who forced him to sit down in this they took a video, sit down in this locker room full of banana peels. When anti-black racism is performed by black people, should the response or punishment be any different than when white individuals do it? Does the context of a clearly unwanted, hostile racist act change when it's done by someone from the same community? Okay. So, Lyra.
Okay. 100%. No matter who's committing the act of racism, it's still an act of racism, and you should still be punished for it. This reading this question, it just made me think of people who go, "Well, how can all police officers be black? How can all police officers be racist? Some of them are black." And they're just like, "What do you mean Atlanta police officers are racist? But aren't this percent of their officers black or whatever? It is black people can still be racist. People of color can still be racist." I read the article and it said that everyone who did it was either of color, of a different person of color, different race, or they were the same color as him. I honestly think it can matter less because it's still racist as fuck no matter who's doing it. Okay, Uncle Ruckus is still a racist asshole. Okay, and so hey, it's the same way. We touched on this a week before. I'm sorry to bring this back to police officers, but we talked about the 5-year-old who was berated by police officers, and people were like, "Well, it's not racist because he's black." Also, I was like, "Well, he felt emboldened to do that because of the kid's race." So it still is an act of racism, no matter who is still doing it. I still think they should be punished for it. I still think it's fucked up. There goes my opening statement.
Okay, KTN.
I didn't read into the full story when I saw it. I just thought once I've read the part about it being people of color, I was like, all right, this is just sad and dumb at the same time. So it would be one of these things like if you know better, do better for me. So should they be punished just as badly? They're young. They're silly. They probably thought it was a funny joke, but there should be some kind of social repercussion, or some kind of social shaming or something, just something. Because I just don't think that it should be. I don't think it should be let go because they're of color. But I also don't think it's as malicious as it would be if it was a bunch of white students who did this to them, because then there's a whole other connotation. You don't know who in that group of white students is trying to be malicious or trying to be funny. You know what I mean?
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, this one's kind of hard for me, which is why I chose 2. But I think this is more of an egregious act of bullying and hazing, and when it comes to sports, the banana peels insinuate there's something really racist, but more importantly, it's just, I feel like this is more about boys in sports, people forcing their teammates, their friends to do things out of like just to be funny, or just like some act of like some twisted act of camaraderie or something. I don't know if the people like the people like the black kids in this were particularly being like anti-black more than they were just like trying to be funny. I don't think they probably thought of it that way. But in terms of like, should people of color who would participate in those acts be punished that severely? To a degree, yes, I do agree with that. It's just I don't think this is one of those instances. I don't think the student was like particularly physically harmed like severely in that way, and he came out and gave a statement about like they had a talk with the team. He forgave him and he let his feelings be known, and he had them all apologize, and that they're going through this. I don't know if there'll be any like jail time or anything for this. I don't know if there should be. This is more about like teaching kids how to properly behave and how to properly treat each other as human beings. And that's all I got for this one.
Fanatic.
Yeah, so yeah, it's crazy because I looked everywhere to try to find out the information on the color of the people that were doing it, and it seemed like that was just really one of those cover-up statements because they didn't really want to admit. Every article I found didn't say like the all of the kids were people of color. It just said that there were some color, some people of the same of the kids race, and some people that were of a different race. Which is just broad, right? But then I went and did the work of looking at the actual population of that city, and it's like 82% white and only 5.8% black. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It sounds, I mean, and yeah, so I would probably assume just based off of those numbers that the vast majority of the kids that were involved in that hazing were white. And it does seem like there's plenty of situations where black people being a hyper minority in given circumstances can sometimes perpetuate some of the harmful attitudes or whatever of the people around them. I don't think it's ever excused, but I definitely can understand how that kind of thing happens. Not being comfortable standing up to all of the people that are around you. I think it's absolutely egregious. I don't care that the kids afterwards had to talk about it, in which they apologized. I think that the vast majority of these kids in a high school were well aware of what they were doing and how it was wrong. I think a lot of times people jump into damage control. And in this situation, once the situation got like out of control, or once everybody became aware of this thing, and it was like, oh, well, we better do something about it. And I think that's when they started shifting to we apologize, and yeah, we recognize it's wrong. I think they knew it was wrong from the beginning. It was absolutely degrading, absolutely humiliating. And I think using the words of a victim to basically say, well, I'm okay with this, I don't think that does enough for us, because I think he's also a child. He clearly looked dismayed at like what was happening to him in that point. And I think the fact that he doesn't want to be labeled as a victim, I think is behind the motivation for him to try to start like kind of pushing back and be like, yo, no, it's fine. I genuinely love these guys. They're good guys. A lot of times in youth, you don't recognize. I've been duped by some racists that I've allowed to be in my circle and didn't recognize that they were racist for far too long. So I can't take him at word. I can't just take his word and then say, nah, it's not that big a deal. I don't think that's fair.
Azzy?
Yeah, this is a huge deal. It's a failure of the community. It's a failure of parents. It's a failure, and it also reflects, I would say, man, when I see this, it's just another instance of negative black dynamics where there's these microaggressions and macroaggressions that happen across the scale, where it could be like if you're too dark, if you're too light, if you have a certain facial structure, you might look like something like an animal. They'll try if you're the way you look, the way you speak, too white, too black, too stupid, too like. It's a dynamic where we have ingrained, and it's come from the oppressive nature from white culture. Black people have ingrained white culture, and they think it's funny. We make jokes about it now just to express our pain, and but we do it to the detriment of others. And they think like, oh, and because they're young, they think it's just a joke, we're just playing around. But literally, when you go into the case, somebody said, do it or I'm going to break your kneecaps. literally somebody said, if you don't do this, I'm going to break both. So now it's not just a joke anymore. They forced it on the guy. They said, yo, if you don't do, and it gets aggressive in the locker room. I've been in the locker room. Guys, they special bunch of guys, bunch of testosterone, people trying to, especially when we just worked out, everybody's excited and they just picking on each other, and then stupid jokes get said in the locker room. Stupid things happen in the locker room. I still don't give them a pass on this. And this is why I tell parents, like I was talking to Spinak the other day, my dad, we didn't really have talks. We weren't so pro-black. The only thing we really talked about was, only thing we ever had was in consistency was Bible study. Everything else, he just showed us things, we watched Eyes on the Prize, and it was revealed to me as a young child, and my mindset was set that there are certain things that black people do and that white people do, and there's certain dynamics that are happening within this country that is not acceptable. And some families just have not done that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Joe Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, hazing's a problem. Maybe we're all in agreement here, but hazing is a problem in schooling. And the procedures at the school level, at the administrative level, have not really caught up to that. HBIC has done a lot of good for these uppity, nice white schools, if I'm being incredibly honest. But when it comes to the administration of this exact same program designed to prevent bullying and harassment, it's failed students of color severely. With that being said, I'm very much a extremist when it comes to student misconduct. So I'm of the camp where, have fun not being in school anymore. I'm very hardline when it comes to this. I've been pilled to expulsion, period. Now I'd love to get pilled away from expulsion. But if I understand that these behaviors, especially when it comes to hazing and harassment, will continue to happen in sports culture, I will make sure that every child never gets to play a sport again, if that means that it stops. I'm destiny pilled on this take. The bullying of students has to stop, and that means I expel every student on a small misdemeanor, like it's something like a banana peel. Because granted, they will probably, if it goes through the proper vectors, will probably get a couple of days of out of school suspension. I would argue that no, fuck them. Have fun finding another place to educate your child. I don't care how fucked up the system is, but again, if I understand that this system is a failure, part of me still is like, well, what can we do to make sure that's equally applied? And I would argue that, unfortunately, this part of me really, I don't know, pill me out of expel and cancel the entire program. That's all I'm gonna say.
Gotcha. All right. Open to the panel. KTN.
I don't think this is just isolated to sports, though. This happened in the locker room, but there's plenty of examples of students in schools who are bullied like this, either, racially or some kind of, ableism or kind of character they have. And whether it's, right now we're talking about within the Black community, or within people of color, but between blacks and whites too. So I don't think it's isolated to sport. It goes across the entire education.
Chris?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to clarify that me bringing up the victim's statement isn't really, I'm not trying to give the people a pass, just that there's a punishment for these things and they should be punished severely. I just don't think the people of color should be punished any more or less. If they have to be expelled, they'll be expelled. The only thing I just think this is more of a hazing and bullying problem that is in sports in general. even with this race issue, there's other, like in other schools, like even in all black schools, you have issues with this type of bullying. It may not be racially motivated, but it is there. And I think they should just be punished accordingly. I just don't have any too much of any too strong of like thoughts on this issue. So yeah, that's all I have.
All right. Anyone else?
Something that I want to say to like everyone who looks at this article, something that really stood out to me was that one, that this article, like when you read it, like they really went out of their way to be like, oh, you know, there were people of color there too, to kind of be like, oh, well, maybe it's not racist because they're of color. Please do not think that it's white versus people of color. There's a reason why the term Black, Indigenous, POC, and POC exists. There's a reason why there's a distinction there, because anti-Blackness pierces many more communities rather than just white. There are plenty of people of color who are just as racist as white people, and there are like some instances where they can be even more racist than white people. So, you know, don't think that just because some of the students involved in this incident were Black or people of color, that maybe it wasn't quite as racist as you think, because it's still racist. And like, hey, sue me, but here's the gag. Even if everybody on this football team was Black, I would still say that this incident was racist, and I would still say that at the very least they need to be kicked off the team, because even if you don't agree that it's racism, hey, it's still bullying and it's still hazing. It's very disturbing, and like this, and like what Fanatic said, I could care less that he got apologies out of these students, because like he's a child, he's a student. Of course he wants to do damage control, because now he has to walk around school and have all these stares at him. And he's on the football team. Everybody at school knows about this. And of course he's going to just want things to go back to normal. So of course he's going to try to say like, hey, don't be too mean, don't label me as a victim. He has every right to do that. But don't take that to be like, oh, racism okay now. He said it was okay, so racism okay now. No, it's still racist. It's racist no matter who's perpetuating it, whether they're Black, people of color, whether they're white, it's still racist. And we still need to take action against it. At the very least, I think they should all be kicked off the team. I'm not sure about going a full-on expulsion route, but hey, I wouldn't knock it. But at the very least, I would say they all need to be kicked off the team.
You'll get there.
I agree that I don't think that my stance, unless the case is unclear, I don't think anyone should be punished more or less. Like, I don't think they should go to all the non-Black students and be like, you go to jail, then go to the Black students and be like, oh, you get I think they should all get the equal punishment, because they're all just as guilty, I think, because they're still perpetuating anti-Blackness and racism.
So we don't have to just like focus on this one specific incident. Like, you know, the question asked in general, like if when anti-Black racism is performed by Black people, should the response be punishment be any different than when white individuals do it? I don't think it should be. Okay, yeah. Sure.
I think they should all be punished equally.
So this is where the debate starts, because I disagree with that entirely.
Yeah,
I feel like they should be punished. I don't think that they should be punished equally at all. I think there's a reason why we have like codified hate crimes, because not all crimes are equal. And I do think that we do have specific presumptions about the intentions of individuals under certain circumstances, and whether or not it's from a place of hate or with the intent of dehumanizing versus just, you know, a general, any other kind of crime. Like I can dislike an individual of my race, and it's not going to be I'm hating him because he is Black. I don't like him because of whatever the other reasons are. There are the possibility for non-Black people to hate Black people and have anti-Blackness that's specifically racially derived. And I do think that we should probably have special codes specifically for hate crimes. Hate crimes are very distinct from other types of crime. Now, if Black people are participating in actions that eventually become hate crimes, I wouldn't say that. I would probably assume that the Black people in these circumstances wouldn't be doing it from a place of hate, of the other intentions for which we even like codified hate crimes. So I do think there would be a distinguishment there.
Yeah,
I think that opens up a can of worms.
Yeah, I disagree.
Go ahead, Joe.
I definitely disagree, but let's
join me.
We could talk about it, but I will let Joe say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe, then KT.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like Fanatic is totally correct here, in my opinion. Where one of the problem and God damn it, I don't want to pivot off of this part, but this might feel like a pivot. I'm sorry in advance. One of my biggest concerns in public schooling, I'm going to use this public schooling broadly and just the education system broadly, is that we treat education about the history of discrimination and how it manifests in reality as some type of secondary thing, right? Have you like? I don't. It's like we set this like. Situation of like, oh, you did. Fact is totally the school day by 45 minutes. You fucking put it in there. It has to be a conscious effort. Conscious and continual effort, excuse me. Because so often when you see people participating in anti-Black behavior, and you're like, well, I don't know why this is bad. And then that's it. Like, they just get suspended, they just get put out of school, and then it's like there's no additional thing. And if it is an additional thing, it's separate from the school curriculum as this like punishment for your behavior. When I would argue that you need like it needs to be in the curriculum, like the history of race, history of discrimination, all of those things needs to be in the curriculum all the time, because then like there you can't use the whole like, well, they didn't know any better it's such bullshit. Like oh god, I'm gonna sound like such a fucking socialist. My community just recovered from this situation of a high school senior comparing Black women to slave auctions. Where where have I seen Black women outside? And it's like, oh yeah, at an auction. And then like the entire fucking community was like, well, what about his future? It's totally fine. I will see him every day when he drops off my Grubhub order. But like frustration.
Come on, Joe.
Is that my frustration is that like you need to have continual education about these topics that still manifest in society. Like there's only so many McDonald's cashiers that we can have named Chad and Jonathan before it's like maybe we should just start educating white people on the history of race. Like maybe this is an easier thing to do.
Okay, so I mean I'll go to KTN first, but like this is a hard pivot. I would like to actually stick to the topic. So
that hurt.
Let's go KTN, and then I guess Lyra, and then I do want to like jump in because I disagree with some things that have been said. Go ahead, KTN.
Black in regard to anti-Black rhetoric or bullying or hazing towards other Black people. I grew up in the 90s in high school, and like a lot of that happened. We had a lot of roast sessions where the roast session between Black people was no joke. The jokes came from anywhere. The jokes came from your mom, color, your skin, anything. They'll compare you to. It got ugly, and the pass was given to other Black people when the jokes got racial. You know what I mean? It all came monkey, this, that. If you looked like an 8, you were getting roasted for an 8. Like, and the thing is, it's not like these people were cracking these jokes weren't conscious of what these racial things evoked, but it was all for the lulz. Okay, now we're in a different time, and now it's something like that is a little less accepted. But I think when it comes to like the perpetuation of anti-Black things in our community, I think it's a lot harder to. It's a lot harder, even though we should. It's a lot harder to basically say to each other that we have to hold each other to we have to constantly punish each other for something that we're all kind of part of. But because for me, I obviously know better. I shouldn't be making those jokes, but it's something that I think for some people can't be teased out. But then that's another thing about people being proud of themselves, and also being willing to say, because I am Black, I'm not going to make these jokes. I'm not going to do these things because I care about how the broader world sees me or how we see each other.
Okay. Let's go Lyra, and then I'll step in afterwards.
So first I want to say that one, I 100% agree that, you know, context in these situations is important. Like how you guys said that, you know, like sometimes it's not quite as obvious when a Black person is involved, just how racist, and not just with Black, because this happens with like other communities of color, but you know, it may not be quite as clear as day when a Black person or a person of color does it, to see how racist or how malicious it is because of several factors that go into it. So I do agree that context is important, but like if we're talking about like bullying in schools and like hazing and like by extension, you know, people dying at hands of the police, but you know, I'll try not to digress too much. What I'm more so speaking out of the veins of the like definitive acts of racism, and where people are like getting hurt, somebody's getting bullied, whether it's mentally, physically. That's what I'm talking about. Although I do agree that context is 100% important, because hey, if a Black person calls another Black person, hey, what's up, my nigga? But if a white person says it, it's obviously very different. So I agree context is important, but like I'm sorry if I'm too many
important. Really, can you give me an example of what would be a definitive act of racism that a Black person would perform against another Black person?
Oh, I was just about to bring an example of this. I'm
yellow
sorry that
bone, light skin.
Wait, hold on, wait. So you're saying calling someone light skinned would be racist, or would it be colorism?
I didn't say that.
It's problematic, but it's not racist.
Is that colorism? Calling someone light skinned when you have lighter skin? Is that?
Yeah,
that's anti-Black.
Wait, I didn't say it's anti-Black. I said it's colorism.
Yeah, I get you, Gus. Yeah, but like,
colorism.
And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I have never heard a person who was of lighter African American of lighter skin being offended by someone saying they're light skinned.
If you're a dark skin
person,
you're trying to take away someone's Black part and they're light skinned, and you say
for sure,
light skinned ass, blah 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 blah.
That's one thing. No, you're adding a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, you insult them for being light skinned. That's great, but like saying that she's light skinned, is that? And if I'm wrong, it's fine. It's fine. But I've never heard of anyone being offended by that.
The very identification.
Azzy, Fanatics talking.
Okay, so no, it's not the thing in and of itself. Just saying someone's light skinned. Okay. I think we have eyes, we have observation. Okay, yeah. But the idea that colorism exists and that colorism can be used as against light skinned individuals is absolutely accurate.
Yeah, I agree with that. I understand that part. I'm just saying, all I was asking about, like whether calling someone light skinned. That's what I heard. You said light skinned.
That's what I heard. I didn't even get to finish.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Y'all just went totally sideways, but okay. But go back to your question. Yeah, go back to your question. Something that I think about, which is actually one of the previous debate topics that was on this panel. Sorry to meta panel a bit, but I remember one of the topics being that like a Black police officer got caught saying something about those ghetto N-words. And I was of the position, I wasn't on that panel. I think that was before my time, but I was of the position with that question. It was like, yeah, I think he should lose his job, even though he was Black. Cause like, these are people you're supposed to be protecting, and you told us to let me go stop one of these ghetto N-words from getting stabbed, like so flippant and nonchalantly. I think that's like dangerous. That's just one example that I can think of. I can understand if you're not satisfied, but like at the very least, I think we can agree that there are many situations in which a Black person is perpetuating an act of racism, and it obviously is damaging. And like they should be punished for it. I don't think they should be punished for it any more or any less than they are.
I mean, we have
comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, we have right now.
But another thing that I want to touch on was like, just because the person who is performing the act is a part of that community, that doesn't magically make the oppression go away. And I'm going to step over into sexism. I remember there was a case years ago at an airport where a female officer, I can't remember if she was officer or just whatever you call the people at the airport that check people. Basically, she sexually harassed this Muslim woman and like put her hands down her pants and undressed her in front of everyone. And people were dead ass saying, well, oh no, this is a sexual harassment because the officer was a woman. And like, and that the logic in that case is that, you know, just because the officer's a woman, she's still sexually harassing her. She's still being a sexist because she's treating her like that, and a racist because she's treating her like because she's Muslim and also supposed to be a woman. But like also translate over to here, you know, just because they were Black or people of color, that doesn't magically make what the act that they're doing, you know, less fucked up. There are definitely cases in which the context is different. I do not think this is one of those cases where the context should be all that different, because I still think it's fucked up. And at the very least, he's still being bullied and hazed. But like, as Prime said, let's try to like translate this to overall cases. And I'm still of the position that no matter the person's color or creed, they should still be punished just the same.
But you don't think wait, hold on. So do you think that there should be an elevation for hate crimes? Because we have that right now in our laws, and it seems like that we have specific designations for hate crimes that are elevated, that are escalated. Do you think that should be or not?
What do you mean by elevations of hate crimes? I'm sorry.
So like simple assault.
Do you mean like in who they're applied to, or like what counts as a hate crime?
I'm answering your question. So in simple assault, you might get like 6 months for like, I don't know, simple assault, right? Whereas if there's a hate crime attached to it, you might get a minimum of 3 years. Like where like the same way how like they like add extra sentences based on mandatory minimums, like you can get extra sentences and extra charges in certain states and jurisdictions specifically for hate crimes. So do you think that there should not be special designation for hate crimes at all?
Well, my knee-jerk reaction to that question is that a lot of times when we have like these cases that we would see as hate crimes, there still is this huge process that happens out in court where they try to decide to dismantle whether or not it's a hate crime or not. Like even with that shooter who killed all those Asian women, they were like, well, is this really a hate crime? Is it? And he was white. So like, I would say that they still go through that process, even if the person is white. So like, I don't really see that. My knee-jerk reaction is like, I don't see that as something for change because they still go through all the hoops and barrels, even when the person is white. So they're still gonna go through those hoops and barrels when the person is Black. So I don't really see why there should be a difference in opinion there. It's my knee-jerk reaction, I would say.
If I can just
go ahead.
Like, if are we going to start criminalizing jokes? Because think of the Dave Chappelle show. I mean, think of the Dave Chappelle show. No. But they said that their excuse was we're using a joke and calling somebody a monkey. Like to KTN's point, I think Chris Cosmo. I've seen this. I felt this. I've been the victim of it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, bro, you get a little dark, bro. What you doing, man? You get back in the house, bro.
That's but my point, because I'm more so thinking about like things that like are like straight up violent rather than just jokes. Although I do think that's like something that I would like to talk about later.
Well, I mean,
I don't really. I think that's too much of a pivot.
A joke can invoke violence, though, right?
Yes.
Like,
this was a joke that evoked violence.
Well, okay, wait, I'm sorry. Hey, really quick, Lyra, that wasn't an answer to my question. So the question was, do you think there should be special designations for hate crimes? Saying that yes, I'm saying that sometimes when there's a special designation, it's still you still have the burden of proof in the court of law.
I misunderstood totally. Yeah. Oh, okay. I did misunderstand your question. I thought you were asking me if like you know if we should like change like how people get. You're changing like should there be a difference between assault and a hate crime? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, should there be special designations for hate crime legally?
100%, there should be different. But what I was saying, I think there should be special designations for whether something is assault or whether something is a hate crime. But the position that I was more so talking about before was about where do we funnel the people who are of the community that they're like, you know, if this is a woman committing sexual harassment, what do we do? If this is a Black person committing an act of racism, what do we do? I was more so thinking of that. I do 100% agree that like a hate crime is a lot more malicious than an assault. So yeah, I still agree with those designations.
Okay, so then if you do agree with those designations, then explain to me an example in which there would be we would be claiming that a Black person was participating in a hate crime.
You mean like how we would
against their own race? Or give me an example. Now that we know that they are not all crimes are hate crimes, give me an example of a hate crime that a Black person would perpetuate against their own race.
I mean, what I can tell you right now is like I mean, I could think of one of. If you want like specific examples, I'm sorry, I'm not that well versed, but in top of my head, like of a shooter like decides like target Black people because they're Black.
But do we have any historic examples of that?
Okay, but if we're talking about like proof wise, off that vein, I mean, we still already go through a lot of hoops and hurdles in the court to decide whether or not things like that was a hate crime. So I don't see anything different.
Yeah, that's what it works. The point that I'm making. Okay, so I was asking a question and I figured I wouldn't get an answer because there is no real answer.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
No, I'm not. This isn't an attack. My point is, the reason why I asked that question was because I was hoping to be able to demonstrate through the questioning that in reality, like this idea about Black people perpetuating hate crimes against other Blacks sounds a little absurd to me. Actually, I can't think of any example of that. Now, I do understand that we can have internalized racism, we can have internalized hatred, but most of those times it would be really almost impossible to ever designate those things as actual hate crimes. You might say like
they happen though? Do you think like they just don't happen at all?
How do you measure it? Like, how do you gauge?
It would almost be impossible to ever gauge. There's always the presumption most of the time, not most of the time, all of the time. There's always a presumption when it comes to Black people that Black people are hateful of themselves when they're with whatever their actions would be. So it would be really, really like almost like non-existent. And I think I've actually got a case.
So are you of the position that like we shouldn't like? Are you of the position that you're saying that like my logic is faulty because like how it would be like very confusing and like all over the place to even prove that a Black person is in fact being racist? Is that what your position is right now?
No, my position is that because of the fact that it would be almost impossible to designate Black people as doing hate crimes, then I think to answer the original question inside of the poll about whether or not there should be different kind of conversations about Black people participating in hate crimes versus white people, I think the answer to that is yes, because of the fact that it would be almost impossible to ever point out like to show an example of Black people doing hate crimes against other Black people. Now we might be criminal, we might do other things, but like being Black people doing hate crimes, it seems almost non-existent. I can't.
Well, like Fanatic, have you ever seen World Star? Have you seen TSR?
I haven't.
You know, World Star TSR is hosted by I think it's an African who owns either World Star or TSR. I'm not the media that perpetuates certain tropes and scenes of violence, Black on Black. I don't even like saying Black on Black. It feels dirty. It's a dynamic between Black people. You know, you hear KTN, he was talking about back in the day, we used to have whole sessions where we just go at each other and no bars hold.
And those weren't hate crimes.
Everything is on it's not hate crime, but it's a
so if it's not a hate crime, it doesn't matter.
Then I could say the hate crime is like prevention of employment. I don't hire you because you don't have a certain haircut. You know, in New York, they put in legislation that you can't prevent somebody from getting hired based upon, especially Black people, because that's what it was meant for, to protect Black people who would have dreads, braids, afros. You cannot prevent somebody from getting employed based upon their cultural hairstyle.
Yeah, I do want to respond to Fanatic.
Okay, all right.
There's also the situations of inter-Black hate crimes, like for example, Miami. Haitians moved to Miami, and a lot of times they were getting into scuffles in high school with the local Black population. Brooklyn, New York, the Haitians came from Brooklyn, New York. They were getting into beats. The Caribbeans, they were getting into beats. Like, eventually the cultures got down. They got together.
The use of slurs, everything.
But it got real wild in Brooklyn. It got real wild in Queens. It got real wild in Miami, and it got real wild across the country. Where there was definitely like Black on Black, like racial violence. But it was in the high school level, and then eventually it kind of just phased out when they got older. You know what I mean? And
I don't know how many of these were actual hate crimes and just the difference. It was in varying communities. Because, hold on, because go ahead.
Well, and I understand what you're saying, but like in my opinion, and you don't have to agree with it, but in my opinion, if I'm Black and I'm already, I'm Black, I'm there's one of the terms for it is either ADOS or foundational African American, and then someone from another culture comes through, like for say me, my family's from Ghana, or someone from the Caribbean, and the fight start, the already entrenched Black community decides that, it's on site for this new group, but only on the high school level. But when it comes to the adults are they're not with the smoke. You know what I mean? Like the high school level, grade school, whatever, and those things got pretty bad, got pretty violent, and some people did die. Now, because it was Black on Black crime at the time, it was just chalked up to a beef. You know what I mean? And then the police didn't pursue it. They just left it as local neighborhood gangs or local groups that clicked up. So it wasn't on the radar as a hate crime. And also at the time that it was happening, hate crimes weren't
delineated.
Yeah.
And so now okay.
But now it doesn't happen. Like, I think it's pretty tamped down now. But that's just an example of the kind of and there's a bit of that cultural hate currently, a bit of it, but you got to go into small pockets and small communities, and it usually takes a few years for it to just kind of like smooth out. But this anti-Blackness that we're talking about, it goes in a spectrum. It goes from anti-Blackness of people in the local foundational African American groups against each other, from them to Blacks who come to the country years later, back and forth. And it's also the other thing I consider it is trying to get as far away from Blackness as possible. You know what I mean? So, as you're making these jokes, as you're going about your life and getting older, as you might shun your Blackness, it all kind of, and I'm kind of getting away from it. So
a lot, because all you're doing right now is just talking to me about the fact that anti-Blackness exists, and I understand that anti-Blackness exists. I felt like that was precluded. I definitely preambled with that. The thing is, what I'm saying is that I can't think of any examples historically of any president in which we were trying Black people for any kind of hate crime or accusing Black people of doing hate crimes against other Black people. Now, I do understand that there are actually ideas where there might be differences in communities. Like, obviously, we have different neighborhoods within Black spaces where there's lots of hate and infighting and things like that. Most of these, again, are not delineated as hate crimes because they're not hate crimes. They might have other issues, right? Like there might be other cultural issues and other community complications there, but most of these things are not like hate crimes because hate crimes typically have a specific delineation. So because of that, I do think like that's why I said all that without getting into all the other nonsense, specifically to point out that there would be different charges for these, because you wouldn't charge a Black person fighting another Black person in a gang with a hate crime. You wouldn't say that there was a hate crime. You would probably say, oh yeah, this is gang violence, and no one's gonna disagree with that. It could be gang violence. It wouldn't be a hate crime. These things are very distinct for a reason.
Okay.
So now
hold on. We gotta move on. Get some other. So, Lyra, you said you didn't get to answer the question, so do that, and then Chris.
Yeah. I wanted to really respond to Fanatic because I think I understand where you're coming from. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because at the very least, I want to make sure we're not talking past each other. And you are saying I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So first, I want to ask you a question. So is it that you believe that instances of Black people being violently racist towards other Black people, is it that you don't think that situation even exists at all? Or do you think that situation just doesn't happen as often? So why make legislation? Does it exist at all? Okay,
I don't think Black people are doing racial violence against other Black people. They would have, like I said, personal griefs, different communal grievances, other things like that. You can just be violent against a person because you don't like that person, on a personal level, but you're not going to be violent against the person and saying, "I just want to kill other Black people for being Black." That's not.
Okay, so when you say that, I think I see where you're coming from, because it's like when people say, when people point and go, "Oh my God, look at Black on Black crime," which is a term that I hate because Black on Black crime is just straight up crime. So I think that's the vein that you're coming through when you say that, right? Where you're saying well, how could you say, when you mentioned the gang violence example, you were like, well, that's not racism, that's just gang violence. That's not Black on Black crime, that's just crime. Am I correct in that you're holding that position?
Sure.
Okay, so even with that context, I would understand your argument if I was pinning for differential treatment in the justice system. If I was saying that oh, well, Black people who are racist should have a different type of treatment than white people who are racist, which is not what I'm saying. I'm saying they should be treated the same. And so like, even so, like, obviously I understand what you're saying, but like there's a big difference between just straight up crime and straight up Black people were racist. I do think there are cases in which a Black person can be racist and is committing a violent racist act.
No,
like what I just said.
Against another Black, racist against another Black, not just racist in general. If a Black person does a hate crime against a white person, the Black person should be charged equivalently to the white person. If a white person does a hate crime against a Black person, the white person should be charged equivalent to a Black person.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I think it's
Black hate crimes against Black people. Black hate crimes against other Black people.
Well,
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Chris,
like what you just said. I do.
So, Lyra, finish your point, but then I want Chris, because like let's not interrupt, because Chris also wants to jump in. He hasn't had a chance. So go ahead, Lyra. Finish your point.
So I'll try my best to get to like the straight up heart of my argument. So, okay, one, I guess we just fundamentally disagree on like, I definitely do think that there are instances in which a Black person can be racist towards Black people. I don't think it's as common. However, I do still think it is very possible, and it does very much so happen. There is from where you're coming from a legal point of view, I understand why you're like concerned about this, because then you say like, what are we going to, how are we just going to automatically pin, we're not going to automatically pin all these Black people who are just committing crime and automatically make them out to be racist. How are we just gonna like put them all into this pool with all this racist? If we can't, with you, I'm assuming that you're saying, if we can't straight up prove that they are in fact racist, and to that, my point would be saying is that we already go through a long process to decide whether or not an act was racist or not, no matter the person's color. So I don't see any like productivity in having a conversation on how do we prove if a Black person is being racist.
That's not my question. My question was not how do we prove.
All right, so then
it's impossible to prove. It has never happened. It will never happen.
But it has happened. I think we just fundamentally disagree on that.
No. We don't fundamentally disagree on that, because that's a fact. Now you're making a fact.
Well, I think it does happen. Well, I know it does happen, actually.
Can you give me a single example historically ever in the history of everdom in this country in which a Black person has been charged with a hate crime? Never.
That's not gonna.
I'm sorry, for a Black person to be charged with a hate crime against another Black person. That has never happened.
So the example that I just listed, you don't think that's a hate crime? The example I just listed, you don't think that's real?
I don't.
What example?
Okay. Okay. So hold on. Go ahead, Chris. You have been waiting for a long time.
Yeah, you brought up the example with the cop like using the N-word towards like, I guess, Black people they were going to go like deal with a situation with. I don't know if I feel comfortable that we should set that precedent that like Black people like on any level using the N-word should be punishable.
No, I don't think that at all.
Like, yeah, but like what are we going for? What are we classifying as like racism towards another Black person? Like what? Like I don't know of any examples really of that. I can understand like if there's a level of violence, like when it comes to violence towards another Black person, that should be treated as violence towards a Black person. I don't know any specific situations of like, you're Black, I hate you. If you hate Black people, I'd suggest you you be more like hostile towards yourself first, and then like before you go out to other people, because you must hate yourself. I don't know of any like instances where like there's people like, just because you're specifically Black, that's the only reason you are committing this act. That does like, it doesn't, even if it does happen, it doesn't feel, I don't feel comfortable with like us like overcorrecting for like trying to weed that out, or like start charging.
My other point, I don't think we're overcorrecting here. I'm just saying we should apply it. You know, if a person is racist, no matter what color they are, they should be punished as so. I'm not overcorrecting. I'm not talking about changing any policy. I'm just talking about who to apply it to, and to not use race as something to like make an excuse for someone. That's why I'm not trying to overcorrect or create anything new here.
Yeah, and then Phonetic.
Okay, you go, and then I want to go. I definitely want to jump in. I've been waiting a long time. You really want to get into
because
this. And Joe Lewis, just before you say something, I just want to know, Joe Lewis, do you have anything to add to this at all? Don't just let me know if you got something to add. I'm going to ask first. Yeah. You do. Okay.
I got some thoughts and tater tots.
Azzy, go.
Yeah, and I feel like Joe's been sitting here quietly, and I've been taking notes. Hate crimes have historically been used to protect groups from other groups. Even in the business place, when EEOC has to come in and somebody says, hey, this workplace has been using racial discrimination in any form to prevent me from doing my job or getting employment, EEOC steps in. You know, that's their, but they don't charge the individual. They say the whole organization is being audited, the whole organization is being fined. People may get fired from management top down, but it's not that people are being. We're not out here. What we're gonna start legislating self-hate crimes? Like that just confuses. I feel like when you ask the question, has a black person ever been charged with a hate crime against another black person? That's more rhetorical. We can't answer that. Like you can Google it, you might find something, and I cried Googling it, but you just get the list of black against, and you got to go parse through all that stuff, which is why I say
no. The answer is no. It's never happened. I'm sorry.
It's never happened.
I do know. It was a rhetorical.
We all know. So
okay,
why?
So then, why do you keep saying that we can't find that information? You just
because
that statement.
To ask it,
we can't find it. We know. If we know it, then
I feel like you're moving the goalposts by asking.
That was my point from the very beginning. No, it wasn't. It's not a movement of the goalposts. That was
I feel like you're moving. So let me explain. I feel like you're moving a goalpost because we're trying to equate, and this is why I say, are we going to say jokes are hate crimes? There's certain things that black people do to other people. When we brought up hair, and I said, and this happens in employment, where people will prevent you from getting a job if you look a certain way, if you talk a certain way, if you're from a certain place. Like Africans have slurs for Americans. Americans have slurs for African Americans. African Americans have slurs for Africans, for Caribbeans against Caribbeans. Like we're not some monolith. We're very, when you get past the facade, I feel like race in itself confuses things, and and it was intentional. It was just to separate white people from black people, and then expand it because then we introduced it into academia. When I say that black people have internalized white oppression and white aggression from a spectrum from micro to macro, to even with a point, I'm preventing you from getting a job, wouldn't you consider if a white person was saying a black person looks a certain way, has a certain hairstyle, talks a certain way, you would call that a hate crime?
Yeah, I can't.
No, if a black person does it, if a black person
something up that is
no, I'm not making something happen. Just look up EEOC.
Okay, so EEOC was it a black hiring manager?
It was
I
have. So hold on. I'm not saying EEO probably didn't step in. I said they don't charge the person; they charge the organization.
I understand. Has it ever happened where there was a black hiring manager that?
It happened to a Hispanic. I know of Hispanic.
Okay, got you. Hispanic. Has it been black? You don't move the goalposts. Black.
Well, I mean,
black.
It doesn't.
Black on black.
It doesn't matter.
Black.
Hold on.
Don't talk about organizations saying black on black.
You're making it.
I'm not.
Unclear.
You are. I said black from the very beginning. Please don't shift
Just
it.
because we're black, brown, aren't we all protected groups? Yes, we're on the all black panel, but I'm still advocating for everybody who.
Okay. All right. So hold on. Stop.
I just want to finish because my fanatic kind of interrupted me to try to reiterate his point. I would like fanatic. If a black person does the same thing a white person does, and to another black person, I'm going to consider it. And the reason we're having this discourse is because we're talking about there's some internalized hate. It should be, I feel like hate crimes should be expanded so that if a black person does something that's legitimately like a huge aggression that you prevented me, and I'm thinking of like the academic definition of racism. If you're preventing me from getting money or employment or moving up the social ladder because you have some type of agenda or some type of racial prejudice against me, that's a hate crime. And just because the courts didn't find it a hate crime and EEOC couldn't come against the individual because they probably would have lost in court if they came like, oh, it's self-hate. Like, come on, fanatic. Let's be more reasonable about this.
Okay, come on. So we gotta speed up.
Expand hate crime.
Okay, all right. So I'm taking a crack at this. All right. I've been waiting to do this for a while. So, Mr. Fanatic, I do disagree with you here, like a lot, but so does the rest of the panel.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I
so
don't know.
it's fine. It's fine. Anyway, so I've grown up with Caribbeans, right? I've grown up with Caribbeans and how Caribbeans talk about African Americans, right? And the way they talk about African Americans ain't kind, right? And what they talk about, huh?
That's not about the race. It's about their national origin.
So okay. We never break these down in this way. So this doesn't mean like if Chinese people, right, dislike Vietnamese people, right, that could be anti-Asian. That's an Asian person, right, having anti-Asian bias against that person. So like you're saying like, oh, just because it's between ethnicities, right? Like no, like that's anti-blackness because the racism, the stereotypes, those are all the same stereotypes given passed down like through our white majority society, right? Like those views that they have perfectly mirror the views that racist white people have, right? So it's white society are telling us. So it's the same thing, right? It's just one group thinking they're different, right? Thinking that they're better, right? Separating themselves out from black people. But then
community
using
differences, like I talked about earlier. Yeah, of course.
Excuse me, what? Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I said, yeah, community differences, like I talked about.
Yes, anti-black racism. Okay, and then on top of that, right? There is. So, do you think if if a cop kills a black person, right? A white cop kills a black person, that could be racism, anti-black racism.
Can be.
Okay, great. So we know that cops, black cops and white cops, shoot black people at the same rate. So, like, I have an article here on exactly that.
Sure. I don't need the article. I believe it.
Okay, great. So then we can see that there's probably incidences there in which a black cop is killing a black person for the exact same reasons as a white cop, right? That can actually be the case, right? Okay. And then
that's not how you do logic, Prime. Like, yes, I understand that sometimes their reasonings can coincide, but the times where they would differ, and they would always differ, is when a white person is killing a black person.
Why? I don't. That's why I'm confused. Is because I don't understand how this differs, right? Like, so if a white person shoots a black person, right? It doesn't have to be a cop, right? Just shoots a black person, right? And then yells, get off my lawn, you dirty N-word, right? And then a black person does the same thing. How are those two things different? If they both perceive the threat, right? They both perceive the threat of a black person coming onto their lawn, right? And you already, I think I said that you understand that black people have implicit bias too, right, against other African Americans, right? So,
so do they both say hard R?
Yes, sure. They both say hard R. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. In that case, it would happen. That's just never happened before. It will never ever happen. But yeah, in that case, then we'd probably derive by him calling the other black person a hard R in an act of violence. Then we would assume that person happened. I mean, that was a hate crime. But that's never ever happened before. It will never ever ever happen. There would always be a distinction because those two things would always be different. That's my point. This is not real. Like, we can go, I'm asking you, use your brain power right now to come up with a scenario in which we would likely charge a black person with a hate crime against another black person.
Yes, a black cop killing a black kid. You could do that. You could do that. If they could say like that.
No, they would probably say it was based on his job or whatever. They would not charge him with a hate crime.
No. Okay. Maybe we were having a bit of trouble here. So you're saying what a prosecutor would do, right? So maybe that's where it's connect. You're saying this is what a prosecutor would do, and a prosecutor would not take this path, right? You're saying that
ever.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So now we see the difference here because I think what Lyra was saying, right? I think what Lyra was trying to say, and I think what I'm trying to say. Is not what a prosecutor might do. Simply that anti-black resentment and hate crimes like do happen, right? So like if you're talking about like one that's actually been convicted, right? That no, they would use another path because that would be easier. It must be easier than proving that to a jury, right? That doesn't mean that black people don't have anti-black sentiments and carry them out.
That wasn't the question. The question, and I'm reading it right now. When anti-black racism is performed by black people, should the response or punishment be any different than white individuals white
okay.
individuals?
Okay. So no. Yes, I know what my question is. Thank you, Grace. But like, I didn't intend it the way you took it, right? And that's my fault for maybe not being clear. Okay, so I'm saying response just in general, like by society, right? Not just by like the justice system. So the justice system is one part of it, right? Should prosecutors do use hate crime laws? Okay, that's one part of it. But also, like, what should the response of the community be? So maybe I didn't make that clear, and then we were having this confusion. But like, so I'm talking about the larger
portion of that question. The response portion of that question is going to be really, really like identical, because the community is going to respond, I'm assuming, the way we always have, the way that this is literally the same justification we use for black usage of the N-word, which excludes whites, right? It's the presumption that a person would not be operating from a basis of a hate crime. So I'm pretty sure that we would do that. I'm pretty sure historically we always have done that. I've never heard of a black person accusing a gang member of killing another black person because of his race. It's never happened before. We do respond differently, whereas we are automatically ready to investigate if there's a case where a white person kills a black person.
If a black person has been known to spit like anti-black sentiments, right, and then they killed a black person, no, my first reaction would be like, oh, they probably killed him because they're black, right? If it was Jesse Lee Peterson who killed a black person, I'm like, oh, it might be because he's black. If Candace Owens killed a black person, it might be because they're black. It's like there are black people who have been known to have these sentiments, right? We know, like, advanced white supremacy, right? Like, just do that on a regular basis, and then they kill a black person. I'd be, maybe it might not be. It might not be. Of course, we have to investigate it, but it could be because they're black.
Candace Owens is suing out here. Be careful.
He gonna get you for
You better tell him to block that name out.
Okay.
All right. That's all I gotta say now.
Okay.
Looking out for you.
Fanatic, I did have a question, and I won't.
Sorry, I want to, before you do that, I want to go to Joe Lewis, who hasn't actually got a chance to talk. Joe Lewis.
Oh no! Oh no, Jesus. Okay, so I am on the side. A fanatic. He gets my rose. Oh, there he is, the Bachelor. But there's a little bit of nuance there that I think is kind of important here. I would argue that it's possible, while it is possible for a Black American to commit a hate crime in the United States on the basis of race alone, just because I believe that to be possible doesn't mean that it might actually apply in quote unquote reality. But with that being said, the bar for that to be considered a hate crime is incredibly high. And then the question is like, is it so high that it's unattainable? And if we understand how race plays in the United States, that's kind of where I'm at on this. Now, is it possible? I mean, I don't want to say, I know it's possible. As an example that I have in my back pocket, there was a black individual, black gentleman, at my Capitol, and he wanted to go to a white prison for his crime because, and I'm quoting here, big words just fuck different. and I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but the judge didn't really take that too kindly and decided to add additional things to that. With that being said, an instance like that is a blip in what hate crimes look like and what hate speech within intra-racial hate speech looks like. That's kind of where I'm at on that, where I think the bar currently set is just too high for us to see that. Now, is it possible with the extension of hate crime statute that the bar could be lower, so you might see Black Americans being charged with hate crimes on the basis of race alone? Sure, but I just don't know. like we still have a hard time pinning them on the original statue in the first place. Despite it's a really, that's kind of, I don't know, that's where I'm at on it.
But so but we've already addressed this. We literally just addressed this, Joe. So we're not just talking about someone being charged, right? So if you're talking about people being charged and the difficulties of that actually happening, then I agree with Fanatic, sure. And it would be difficult to prove this. Okay, great. But we're trying to have a larger conversation about like the responses to these things. So do you think you believe anti-black? I think you said like black people could commit an anti-black crime. So let's anti-black actions. Move away from the topic of the hate crimes because that brings in legality, and we're stuck on that. But like, you believe black people can commit anti-black crimes against others or anti-black actions?
Yeah, of course.
Great. All right,
yeah.
Great. So,
but again, like when we're talking about like the idea of like a potential hate crime, that's where for me, and just like based on what I understand about,
which is why we're trying to move past that. But that's why,
right? However, you know, something that is kind of, not to go back to the colorism that can exist within black spaces too deeply, but there is, it's a question, and that's why it's more of like maybe a moral or ethic. I don't know if it's moral or ethical, one of these big words of like, where's the line when something goes beyond discriminatory and then ends up being overtly hateful, right? Like, we can, like, it's gonna sound so weird to say because I'm just not good with terminology right now. I learned that there's lecture fans on a debate tomorrow, so my brain is just turning into spaghetti and studying him. So like, one of the things that I think is important is that you can do something that on its face doesn't look like it has racial implications or anti-black implications, but then when does that line end, or that point end, and then overt racism or even like dangerous covert racism begins, right? Like, as an example, there's this girl, I feel so bad for her. Every single black person in my school, a small minority of that, and then it lingered into the non-black community in my school, call her Carly Morgenthau, because they found out that she was Irish and black, and she's about as dark as Fanatic, but she has like Irish hair. Like, what's her name from Brave? Irish hair. And then like people got one correlation and they just drag her every day. And a part of me, and unfortunately, on how like harassment and bullying works, like, yes, it's been reported and it's currently being investigated, but despite that, people still rag on her. And it's like, bro, like, chill. That's a totally like other thing.
Lyra?
Okay, so I'm really sorry for hogging the panel, but like there's two things that I want to do. So for one, Joe, into response to your stance, which I believe is that like a different from like what Fanatic believes, you think that it is possible. However, if I'm correct, you're saying that it's not nearly as like common. So I'm guessing you're saying why make such a big deal about it if it's not quite as common. First, am I right in thinking that's like where your position? Like, you think it is possible, but it's not quite as common. So it's like
sort of, yeah, sort of.
Wait,
it's definitely.
Wait, don't say not as common. What he said was the bar is so high that basically would never ever be met.
Okay, so when it comes to that, in response to Joe Lewis, what I would say is that the bar is already so high in order to prove whether something is a hate crime or not, that in my eyes, I honestly see it as like negligible, because like the bar is already so high to decide that something is a hate crime. So like think about how hard it'll be in court to like prove if a black person is being racist in at that too.
No, it's not.
We do it all the time.
I'm not finished.
But what you said is wrong.
Anyway, the other thing that I want to say was for Fanatic, I think me and you will, I don't think that we'll come to agreement, and honestly I think that's but I did want to ask you a question just so I could like better understand like where you're coming from. I don't want to like attack you or debate you. I just truly don't understand how you feel about this. So I want to ask you a question. I know you really, really hate when I come up with hypotheticals, but please just bear with me. I know you hate that I'm making something up, but because I know you don't like it when I make things up. But okay, if a black shooter, if there's a black shooter who he confesses this, I shoot black people because I hate black people, even though I'm black, I think all black people should die, so I target black people. If that's not a hate crime, what do you think that is?
That would be a hate crime.
So hate crimes are possible? I thought you said hate crimes weren't possible at all.
Oh, he's saying they won't get arrested for it. They won't get charged.
No. Let's not be ridiculous here. Yes, if there was a black person that wrote a black hate manifesto and then he ended up committing some crimes, we would classify that as a hate crime. What I'm saying is it has never happened before. It will never happen in the future because in reality, the vast majority, it has never happened before. It will never happen.
Fanatic already agreed there. Fanatic already agreed. You already said that before.
Wait, just so we're clear, too,
this is crazy.
I understand.
Just to represent the VOD correctly, we're specifically talking about hate crimes as they relate to race, right? I don't think anybody would deny that's.
Don't do that.
No, the reason why I do that is because there's literally dumb fucks in chat going, do these people really think that the hate crime is just about race? It's yes, there's other things on the McDonald's menu, you dumb fuck.
I'm sorry that I came up with such I guess extreme example. I just wasn't sure if Fanatic. I'm sorry. I thought that you were of the position that it was literally impossible. I just wanted to ask you that just
Lyra, with your situation, I understand what Fanatic is saying. With your situation, yes, if that dude did that crime, people would just kind of look at him with a little bit of weird empathy and pity for his self-hating. Because if a black man goes out and writes a black hate manifesto, people would also be like, okay, you're going to get the murder charge, great. But then on top of it, there would be a whole other layer of it where it's wow, is this guy really that self-loathing of being black that he would get away with the hate crime? You know what I mean? I think the population would just be like, oh, that's so pathetic. Oh,
so we can still all at least agree that it's a hate crime, though, right?
We can agree it's hate mark, but
that's all that I want to do with that example. I thought you thought it was impossible, Fanatic, but that's all I want to do with that. I know it's a very extreme example, but I just want to ask that so I could understand if you thought it was possible.
I would just think of it as pathetic and be like, oh wow, just give him the prison time. He's had enough self-loathing. You know what I mean? They wouldn't
because
hate crime enhancement and be like, oh, let's just hammer it into him.
Yeah, it's tricky too because we can have sort of the moral goal. Oh no! Oh god, I'm getting debate bro words of the moral goalposts of something. We can create a hypothetical and go yes, that is racially motivated. Also racially motivated to the point where it can breach the line of being a hate crime. And again, just to make sure my stance is very clear, and it's just that yes, there are situations where individuals are charged with hate crimes. Why the FBI covers it as a statistic. However, the parameters around that, and we're off this, by the way, just to make sure it's very clear where my thought is on this, is that the parameters around this that qualifies for that are just so incredibly not only nebulous, but they imply a lot of stuff where I can hear the lecture fan in my ear just going well, then you can just say anything, hate crime. And it's bro, how much glue do you sniff? Jesus, it's not Elmer's. It's got to be some 1970s shit.
Just to cite a hate crime that did happen of a black man who killed his father because he hated his father so much. His name was Brandon William Martin.
Yeah.
And he was mentally ill also, but he had a whole entire thing where he hated his father because his father was black, et cetera, hated his black heritage, and he went back and he killed his father, killed his uncle, and then killed some innocent bystanders. This happened in 2015. Now, he got the murder charge, but I'm sure the court wasn't going to be well, let's give him the hate crime enhancement because obviously he wasn't well. I'm sure the self-loathing was just too much for them to even just bother with the hate crime enhancement.
Yeah, but I feel like trying to look for things with historical data is it's different from what we're asking. We're talking about the hypothetical instance. We're not using historical data because we already know we're smart enough to understand that they're not gonna say, hey, because you hate other black people, so we're gonna charge this a hate crime. I will say though, and that's why I hate you, Joe. I was gonna bring up the hypothetical. If a black Christian goes up to a black mosque, shoots it up because he hates black Muslims, will he get charged with a hate crime?
I mean, that just happened.
Not. I mean, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, he could.
Yeah, that's literally like, okay, just so we're clear, this just happened.
That's so stupid.
This just happened.
I got you.
Like, this happened yesterday night.
I got you.
That's why I hate you, Joe, because you took out race and religion and
just race. Let Fanatic go. Oh my God, please.
That's so stupid because I mentioned over and over, and it is because I mentioned over and over and over about a black person doing something that would be a racial hate crime. Now, you can have hate crimes for religion. You can have a black person that performs a hate crime against a gay person. You can have a black person that performs a hate crime against another person for any of the other various protected classes. You can have a black person that does something that's a hate crime against women. It can happen, but you can't have a black person performing hate crimes against other black people. It's never happened before. It will never ever. I'm sorry. Against another black person on the basis of race. It hasn't happened before. It will never ever happen again. It's unrealistic, and the statute of being able to prove that is so absurd that we have to go to absurd hypotheticals like the idea about a person writing a racist manifesto in order to justify the conclusion.
No.
We need that much evidence just to try to get it. It's unrealistic. It's stupid.
Fanatic. We just proved that in the court they're not going to do it because according to like public scrutiny and then like the judge and the jury, like they're not going to. They just won't say it, man, because and most likely it's going to be a diverse, and then they themselves have to have that level of cognition. They're not going to have that level of cognition. The normal person isn't thinking, oh, if a black person kills a black person, he hates black people. He's racist against black people. The normal person isn't having that thought in their mind. The normal person is getting up to try to get their 3090 Ti for their computer so they can get crypto. And you know what I'm saying? Like, come on now.
I have no idea where you're.
But we understand though that the parameters.
Happening anymore.
We're not arguing whether or not they're going to get charged. We're arguing whether or not it is a hate crime.
And
right, but the thing is that a hate crime. Right, but a hate crime requires legal statute.
Yeah,
no,
that's why we
you can commit a crime and not get charged.
That's why, and that's why we're trying to move away from that whole thing. And look, I don't think we can make any more progress on this. I think we've hit this. I think we've hit it from every angle, and it's coming in because we run out of time. Any which way, it's fine.
Black man, shoot up a black mosque and see what happens.
I think.
See what happens.
All right, but something that I like one like guiding or guiding thought going back to the original, the water of this topic, the main ingredient. Do you guys, and this might be like a thing that might be too long for another thing, right? Like where do we fit this educationally, right? Where we understand that there's one camp who is trying to actively, through hell or high water, make sure that people learn more about discrimination in the United States when it comes to people's race, identity, and all of that stuff. Their race, sex, mutable characteristics, religion, all of that stuff. And then there's another camp who is incredibly dedicated in painting that this education about this issue in America is indoctrination or something as far as what I've heard in righty spaces, violations and like limiting people's ability to express themselves freely or free speech, which again, like, where are these drugs? I want all of them. But like, where does that fit? Because I think that we need to have better education about these things. And I've been really sort of, I don't know if I'm getting gaslit in real time, where it's like, I'm starting to think that like, where, like, can it have a place to fit in the education system? Like, we understand that like the socialization of people about this topic is insufficient. You know, I just don't know where it fits.
Are you talking about in terms of like anti-blackness to other black people, like black people?
Well, I was speaking just about like racism, sexism, bigotry, all of those things. because we kind of treat it as this like secondary topic that can only get touched and approached with like either
Luke Cage.
What's that?
You didn't see Luke Cage?
Oh, that's like baby steps, man. Like there's a whole like
Bushman owned Brooklyn. He owned Bushman owned Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying?
But even when like
right. You know what I'm saying?
It's like righties were perpetuating a lie, a straight up lie that people were tuning away from Falcon and the Winter Soldier because of a particular scene in New Orleans. And then the right just bought it like it's real, despite the fact that they're like Disney doesn't like you can't track the stat that they claim to exist. Like Disney doesn't post that information.
What are you talking about? Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about anymore. I'm like lost at this point. Like,
well, he's talking about steps to educate the masses on anti-black within the black community.
No, just like overall, all of it.
Overall, anti.
I know. This might be too big for do right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll write this as a question.
Okay,
we'll talk. I'm really
sure.
Bring back Luke Cage.
I would have gone that. Yeah, that was a good. I like that show actually a lot. Okay, so to my audience, hello. We are going to continue on to our open walk on panel. That's coming right afterwards. So the stream is ending. We are continuing on to open walk on panel right after this, right? First, I'm going to give these lovely people here an outro. Then we'll do that. Thank you, Lyra, for coming through. Lyra, I always enjoy having you around. You're good for a fight, whether it's at me or Fnatic. Yeah.
Why y'all
I prefer when you're Fnatic.
Do the whole thing.
Lyra can swing. You know what I'm saying? She got an arm on her. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She'll knock somebody out. Y'all can't just say, Lyra, you are well spoken. You hold your ground.
Yeah.
I'm like laughing.
UFC fighter.
I'm like laughing at myself because like it's always so fun to like once the panel is over to like think back in your head and like look at everything that just happened. Because like I'm just looking at myself and I'm like, oh my god, I'm slowly becoming Fnatic. Like I'm muting and I don't know if you saw me like raging at my chat, like screaming. I was like, oh my god, I'm turning into Fnatic. But yeah, this was a fun, chaotic panel. I'm becoming more and more like, you know, as these panels go on. But they're very fun. You know, I'll like, I'm not even going to try to do a closing statement on the topic because I will ramble as I so often do if I try to do it. But you know, my name is Lyra Centauri. Hi everybody. After this panel, I'm going to play It Takes Two with my mod. You know, have a couple of drinks. I need some after that panel. But you know, come if you want. And thank you, Prime, for always inviting me to these panels. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for always accepting. And like, it's not because of the panel, it's because of Fnatic. Let's be honest. Like, that's why it's like, all right, toss a few beers back. But no.
I get happy with Fnatic on the panel. I'll be like, ooh, Fnatic, yes, this will be spicy.
Laura, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm not trying to dox you, but it always seems like every time we have these panels, the light never changes in your room, and it's like constantly 4 p.m.
Really? That's really funny because I'm actually in the same time zone as Prime. I'm on the East Coast, and like right now it's 11:30 p.m. for me too.
Are you gaslighting me right now?
I think it's like a street lamp right outside your room because there's light coming in from the direction like of your PC, right? So like, is there like a street lamp like right outside?
Yeah, there's a street lamp right outside my door. Like you can see.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what.
Jeez.
Like,
oh God!
No! Don't show nobody where you live now. That's the last offense.
Okay, I was just because I was like, is she from Australia? Like, what the fuck?
No. I'm from Maryland. I'm on the East Coast.
Gotcha.
Oh, she in Maryland.
Hey, where were you on January 6th? I'm just kidding. I knew where you were. You were at home like all of us, except for one who is suspectfully enjoying rolled rice.
About that topic yet? Like, has there been a conversation about that?
Fuck him.
No.
We can talk about it. We can talk about him when we see him at the line of Burger King. Okay, like
No.
when he gets our order wrong. All right.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Moving on. KTN, thanks for coming through. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. Good panels. I'm probably gonna stay for that late night smoke after this, because that late night smoke gets hot too. So join Prime K's walk-on panels, because a lot of people in chat are saying some shit. So I'm sorry. A lot of the chat dudes got a lot of heart on keyboards. So page plastered on the internets, so I'm down with it. But yeah, man, KTN, I guess, average dude with the average job. I got no streams, no nothing. I just do this as a hobby.
Okay. So KTN is seeing the larger picture here with chat. A lot of people in chat got a lot of shit to say. I don't want to step on the panel, though. I don't want to step on that panel and start actually back it up. No. Trust me, I've been dealing with this for months and months and months. Been inviting a lot of people. All right, well, I hear you. Come on in.
All the smoke.
Yeah.
Want to pull up. We come around.
They was like, oh no, man, I don't have a camera. Oh no, you can just use your phone. Just call them through your phone. Oh, it's broken. I don't know. I lost it. Yeah. Yeah. It's cool.
Bro, CGI, what, 2 weeks ago? He had his phone laptop on like a shoebox, fucking had his headphone audio siphoned another way. KTM was the same way. Like, he's coming like some FBI shit where it's like the camera's over here. It's fucking, people be making excuses.
Yeah, man, people a lot of excuses as to why they can't make it. There's some people who've been here for months.
You made it like 200 in, like, I don't care. I'm coming with it.
There have been people who have been on my channel for months and months and months, and I've been telling them, "Hey, come on, right?" And they still got an excuse. Oh no, my wife is having a baby.
You gotta hit him with, or they hit you with the Kobe Bobby, where it's like he puts in a really spicy take, and it's like, hang on, I gotta take a work call, and it's like, fuck.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of people out there, who never step it up. There's a pattern I see. But thank you, KTN. All right, next we have Joe Lewis, our MVP, who was definitely working that CPT tonight.
Bro, I had Five Guys for the first time in like fucking months, because I guess they gave it out to the teachers today. It's like just as a thank you, and I'm fucking stocking up. They like, this fucking rich ass township ain't eating Five Guys, so I took like 5 burgers and shit. I have food for the rest of the weekend. I had that one. I was like, oh, the panel starts at 8. I'll take like a small nap. Psych. Like, I woke up, it's like 9:20, and it's like, oh fuck. Like, oh shit, but. Yeah, no, like this is a lot of fun. Obviously I'm not going on the app. I won't be there tonight because I have to prepare. I'm on the Hippy Dippy podcast tomorrow.
I don't know. What's that? I don't know.
It's just a place where you have to argue against lecture fan.
That doesn't seem.
That's not even a thing.
I don't know. We don't know.
I believe it.
Seems like I don't know. It's a weird like combination of syllables. I don't actually.
Yeah, it's a lot of
like some bummy stuff going on over there, bro.
Basically, I have to now over prepare because I thought I was just having a conversation with normal people tomorrow, and then I saw this person who's apparently a constitutional lawyer who doesn't have any certification to be a constitutional lawyer, whose microphone gain is so goddamn high I can hear it all the way inside of my inside my brain, not outside, inside, in the water. It vibrates inside of my water, the water of my brain. Yeah,
you saying it's vibrating your molecules?
Okay.
I'm just saying that, like, I now understand why Mike Pence advocated for electroshock therapy. Okay, I understand because that seems to be the better route comparatively. And I'm just talking shit. My channel is twitch.tv/Joe Lewis. The O's is 0. Glad to be here. You guys are great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard stop selling raw fish on Hippy Dippy.
All right.
Yikes.
So moving on, we have Chris Cosmo. Chris, thanks for joining, especially at the last second. Thanks for hopping in. Really do appreciate that. Chris, tell them about yourself.
Problem. Yeah, my name's Chris Cosmo, second O is a 0. Mainly coming to Twitch because as an art streamer, I'm trying to add to the number of Black people and in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to come watch me, try to support another Black artist and an already super small pool of people of color in that space. It's flooded with white people. You can count the number of people of color in there on both hands. Come out and support. I'm gonna start full time next week. I'm not my art streams are not gonna be political. I come to Prime Space to be political. I like the vibe. I'll debate you about comics and anime and all that stuff. But when it comes to that side of things, just come chill. If you want to have me do some fan art for you, I'll do that. But it's Chris Cosmo, second O 0.
Thanks so much, Chris. Really do appreciate you. And everyone, check him out. Links in chat. Oh, actually, I'll put it in chat. Assuming he typed in my chat. Let's see if he typed in my chat. Oh, you did. Typed in my chat. There you go. All right. So everyone, please go take a look. Okay. Next, we'll go to Azzy. Azzy, thanks as well for joining us. Man, you confuse the shit out of me. I'm if
you trying to pin me down?
No, if this was an actual comic book, my face would just be replaced with a question mark lots of times. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but as still, I appreciate you. I don't know what the fuck's happening.
So my points were on a 4th level intellect.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Bro, you gotta level up, Prime. Come on,
it's my fault.
You've been arguing with these babies this whole time. Come on, you gotta go to Joe's classroom. He gotta school you. You gotta bring you up. But Azzy Ohm. You can find me Azzy.Ohm on Instagram, on Twitter, Azzy_Ohm on Twitch. I've been dabbling in blurred content. I'm probably gonna continue streaming now, and I'm probably gonna play Legacy of Kain Defiance. I've never touched it. I feel like I'm gonna spend an hour or two on that. I love coming to these debates. I told Fnatic before, I feel most alive in the fray, and then at the same time I'm able to come back whole, because you guys can't touch me. I feel amazing here, and I love all y'all. And yeah, that's it. I appreciate Prime for inviting me. I'm always ready to come back, and I'll be sticking around. I probably got to take a break. I'm gonna be honest. Like Lyra said, she's starting to morph into Fnatic. I'm starting to become like y'all. I've been around y'all too much. It's like when you go to a family reunion every week. You know what I'm saying? Nah, bro. I just saw you last week, bro. Give me some time. So I'm probably gonna have to, because I was just here last night. We didn't sleep, and then I'm here again, and I got responsibilities. How to live life.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Anyway, last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Fnatic. Fnatic, well, I give a lot of shit. Why? Because he deserves a lot of shit. But still, that doesn't mean we don't have a lot of love for Mr. Fnatic. We find ourselves on the opposite side. We're fighting each other the entire time. All right, from the start to finish, we're fighting each other. But still, even when we don't happen to find agreement on a bunch of subjects, I'm always thankful that he spends his time, right, his busy days, busy nights with us. And he shares his perspective because his perspective is quite unique. And he makes sure you know what it is, right? And he doesn't like it when you get it wrong, right? When you repeat his point back to him and he feels like you didn't do it right, because he's going to correct you. He's going to correct you forcefully because he's too elegant of a nigga
the words in Fnatic's mouth. That's one thing you will never do.
You will not do that. You will not get away with that. But thank you. Seriously, I do appreciate it. All right, Fnatic.
Yeah, listen, it's always embarrassing to me when somebody parrots back to me some of the nonsense that comes out of my mouth. But yeah, it's accurate. Like I never can be mad about it. I just cringe because it's like, oh God, I am like that. Yes. Yeah, but you did say it right. Last but certainly longest. I feel like this was it was a really great. It was a great panel. It got really heated. I said we would go at it. Like, you know what I mean? I don't believe in boring. And I wanted to say the stream is not ending. The stream is not ending. Oh God, the stream is not ending. We're about to have a walk-on panel. Now I'm going to take a small break so that I can recharge my energy. And then I'm coming back and I'm coming at all y'all niggas. Be up in there and catch this work. I am a debate lord, I guess now. It's I can't say now. Like I've probably always been one my entire life, but I'm definitely turning other people into debate lords, and for that I'm super proud. Lyra, welcome to the fam. Welcome to the fam. Like, you know what I mean? That's what this is about. It's all about being debate bros, going at it, specifically on Prime Kai's panel. There's no other panel. No other panel exists on Twitch, on the Twitch space, because all the other things aren't really panels. Are just nonsense. This is an actual panel, and this is the only place that we should all be to discuss these actual issues so that we're not all just in a circle jerk. This is the best place to be. Prime is the best. Subscribe to Prime. I'm expecting to see 3 subscriptions to Prime by the time I'm done talking. And to be honest with you, I genuinely do feel like this is like literally my favorite space to be at on Twitch. Like this is honestly the only place that I'm committed to it on Thursdays. Even though sometimes they don't invite me on Thursdays, I'm always like, okay, this is what I know I'm gonna do. I don't know what the hell's gonna happen in the rest of my week because I got ADHD and I don't plan anything. But I know Thursdays I'm going to be here. You know what else? I know that I'm also gonna do. I'm gonna be promoting my music thanks to Prime because he always tells me to do it. Here's an album. This is an album I don't link very often. It's called Retro Future. My first live album. Listen to that on the drive. Go on a night drive because that's what this album is about. Get in your car, put that album on, and go on a night drive. Dang, nobody subscribed. I hate all y'all niggas. Since y'all niggas is hating.
We have new economic numbers. They're pretty good. New weekly jobless claims have again hit a new pandemic era low. The Department of Labor once a week releases these numbers. They released them this morning. Initial jobless claims for the week ending April 10th, meaning last week, came in at 576,000 new claims. This is both lower than the 700,000 number that was expected and also the lowest in the era of the pandemic. Continuing claims for the week ending April 3rd, 3.7 million, basically right on track with what was expected. And these are numbers that are likely to continue improving if we can keep vaccinating quickly. We've talked about how in some sense, the unemployment numbers are inversely correlated to vaccination. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other factors, including local hotspots and state-by-state guidelines. What's going on in Texas is different than what's going on in the state of Washington, as two examples. But if you look at the vaccination dose numbers, those numbers continue to increase. We're now up to 3.3 million doses per day. In another 40 days, things could be looking quite good. It's quite plausible that by Memorial Day, you will see more states drop mask mandates. I'm not advocating for or against it. I'm sort of talking about the perspective that I think more and more governors are taking here. But short of debating that, for me, the lesson here, there's probably a few lessons, but the best lesson here is the best economic policy, the best way to protect and shield and recover the economy during a pandemic has always been to just deal with the virus. And what I mean by that is early on in March, debates about flights and debates about freedom and debates about masks and closures, quarantines and the constitutionality of lockdowns and all of that stuff. There has always been one path, which is the most the more quickly you deal with the virus, regardless of the debates around freedom and constitutionality and whatever, dealing with the virus most quickly will help the economy. And we have examples of it. New Zealand did an incredible job dealing with the virus. They didn't need long debates over whether to open or close or masks or not. They did it, they dealt with it, and then they had long periods of normality where much of the rest of the world was very far from normality. Israel, in terms of vaccination, Israel was able to strike a deal early with Pfizer, being a country of only 9 million people, to get enough doses for everybody in exchange for sharing data with Pfizer. Businesses are open in Israel. Passover was almost completely normal in Israel a couple of weeks ago. The entire time, the United States wasted time with conversations that were being forced upon us by the right, by the Trumpists, by the anti-maskers, by whoever else. And all along, the best medical policy was the best economic policy. That's what we learned, and it is increasingly borne out in the data that we get. Had we figured out testing earlier, instead of Trump saying, we don't need this, slow down testing, 15 cases will go to zero. If we just figured out testing and were able to contain it, we would have had a problem, of course. We would have had a problem in a country of 330 million people, but it wouldn't have gotten as bad as it did. The economy would have gotten better more quickly. Had we had competent leadership early, the economy would have done better all along. Other good indicators, economically, by the way, retail sales up about 9% higher in March. That is significant. A lot of it is coming from bars and restaurants and other business areas. And then the result of all of this is the stock market popping today. All-time highs. You're not seeing Joe Biden tweet endlessly about it. But the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up more than 200 points as of when I looked at it half an hour ago, hit an all-time high. The S&P 500 hitting an intraday record, like forever. The forever record was hit today. NASDAQ up 1%. Of course, the economy is not the stock market. But the point is, all of it together confirms that the better we do against the virus, that's the economic policy. It's not the debate between public health policy and economic policy. It's all the same. The economy does better when we better deal with the virus. We better deal with the virus when we understand that we don't need to think about the virus as separate and distinct from the economy, because it all goes hand in hand. We'll hope for continued improvement in the numbers. My belief is, and again, I always make very clear, I'm not coming up with this stuff on my own. I'm looking at the public health experts because they are the experts. It seems as though 40 days from now, numbers will look significantly better. And hopefully, as a result, economic numbers will as well. A Fox News debate between Geraldo Rivera and radical right-wing former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino exploded last night into screaming and insults. And, you know, in this segment, I don't actually care to talk about the substance of what Geraldo and Dan Bongino are talking about. What I want to talk about is how worthless this type of media is. And it actually relates to this show in a way as well, and something we've been doing or not doing, maybe better said. We're going to look at a segment on Fox News that is now down to the level of those sort of like internet blood sports type channels. If you haven't seen them, good, you're missing nothing. But the way that these internet blood sports channels work are they're live streams where you might have two people plus a host or like a panel of four. Sometimes it's 10 people just screaming at each other. Sometimes these things go 3, 4, 5 hours. No one learns anything. I'm often invited to participate in them, and I never do because I don't want to waste my time. Let's look at this segment. The general topic is the unrest in Minnesota surrounding the police shooting of 20-year-old Dante Wright. The police officer has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. We will be talking about the charge on today's bonus show. Of course, Dan Bongino in this segment is not being particularly sympathetic to the victim and their family, and it just completely explodes and devolves into screaming and insults. Take a look at this.
You tell that to the black families that see their sons being killed.
That's all you
twice
got.
the rate
you
of
got
white
nothing else,
sons.
buddy.
That's
got nothing
fact.
else.
That's a fact.
You've got nothing else. All you want to do is see the country burn. You just want to see the country burn. That's it.
I want to see the country burn. You son of a bitch. I want to see the country burn. You punk. You're nothing but a punk.
Yeah.
You're a punk, Bongino. You're a punk.
You wouldn't tell me that to my face.
We'll leave it there. Coming up, the left continues.
Now, if your instinct is like mine, at least initially, you feel like, okay, it sort of seems like Geraldo is more on the right side here than Dan Bongino. I hear Geraldo talking about the relative rate of police shootings against black men versus white men. Okay, maybe like the broader, maybe in some sense, Geraldo is making more sense here. The broader analysis is that this is trash. This is garbage. You know those Russian nested dolls? They're called matryoshka dolls. You open one and there's another slightly smaller doll inside, and then you open that one and it, you know, all the way down. That's what this is of nonsense. And what I mean by that is you start with the big picture, right? The biggest doll. Fox News is a propaganda network with a right-wing slant. They deliberately blur the lines between news and opinion, and they use that blurring to feed ignorant right-wingers exactly what they want, while running interference and carrying water for Republican politicians and administrations. That's Fox big picture. Okay, you open that up. You look at an individual show. The individual shows are just a disaster. You've got Gutfeld, the supposed comedy show. It's not funny. You have Jeanine Pirro on the weekends. When she's not drunk, she's making no sense anyway. You've got Hannity, Tucker Carlson. They have completely bamboozled their audiences into thinking that they report news. When they get sued, their lawyers will quickly say, this is entertainment. This is entertainment, but the viewers don't realize that. You have Hannity, who's friends with Trump and repeats Trump's propaganda, and people watch it and they don't realize this is just Trump's friend feeding me nonsense. You have Tucker Carlson, who's doing subtle white nationalist talking points. We talked about that earlier this week. You open up the individual show box, and then you get to a specific episode about what's going on in Minneapolis, where the entire framing is always to defer and default to the position of police. You open that up and you get to this single segment with Geraldo and Dan Bongino. It's a debate, supposedly to give us two opinions. Maybe Geraldo's opinion is a better one than Bongino, but it's all sensationalist trash. It's just blood sports from which we learn nothing. And this is partially why I've done less and less of the debate the right stuff with bad faith people. All the time, we used to bring on just these morons, bad faith right-wingers, and I would argue with them, and it was interesting, sort of like for shock value and entertainment value, and they did pretty well. But we didn't really learn anything, and no one learns anything from this. It's just garbage. It's not worth the electricity and the bandwidth required to produce it and to watch it. One more segment from this just to show you how completely vapid it is.
Statistics, but he doesn't know any of that. But secondly, this is again why being a reporter about police.
What, you have a 10-minute career as a cop?
Geraldo, you got it. Geraldo,
you've been running for office for the last 20 years.
Take a Valium.
Geraldo.
So my hope is, and I've said this before, I hope that people watch some shows like mine, not trying to put myself out of business, but my shows, if you think of a food pyramid where you put the junk food at the top, I hope that people are building their knowledge of the world and of important issues first by understanding how to think, epistemology, critical thinking, media literacy. On top of that, you build your knowledge of history and geopolitics and political philosophy by reading books. On top of that, you read reporting, ideally original reporting, and then you pick some commentary and opinion like my show at the top of the pyramid for flavor, right? If you're only watching Fox News, and many people are only watching Fox News, that's where they get everything. They get their worldview, they get their, everything comes from Fox News. If that's how you learn and you get informed, it's a disaster, and we will never solve the problems that we have in this country. So, I don't even care to adjudicate Geraldo versus Dan Bongino here. This is just like the logical endpoint of, as we, unpacked those Russian dolls. When you start with what Fox News is, and you go to what shows are on Fox News, and then you look at the hosts that Fox News selects, and then you go down to the segment level, you get a segment that is of, it's not even zero value. I would argue it's of negative value. If that's how you inform yourself about the issue in Minneapolis, you end up less informed and less able to really understand what's going on if this is what counts as news for you. Let me know what you think. Am I being too harsh? Find me on Twitter @DPakman. One of our sponsors today is Lucy, and they are giving my audience 20% off. Lucy is a company founded by Caltech scientists with only one mission, which is to help people quit smoking and vaping by offering a clean, affordable nicotine alternative. Now, many of you know, you've heard the stories. I've known several people in my life who have struggled with quitting smoking. I've seen how difficult it can be. And nicotine alternatives can be hugely helpful. Lucy offers a nicotine gum in 3 flavors: wintergreen, cinnamon, and pomegranate. They also have lozenges, which come in cherry ice flavor. Lucy is affordable. It'll ship right to your door. You don't have to go out to the store. Shipping is always free. You can buy single boxes or save with a subscription. It's time to throw the cigarettes away and get rid of the vape, and Lucy can make it easier. You'll find a ton of excellent reviews online from countless people who have used Lucy to quit smoking and vaping. Go check them out at lucy.co. That's lucy.co. The URL is in the podcast notes, and you will get 20% off when you use the coupon code Pakman. Quick disclaimer, I'm required to give: these products contain nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. One of our sponsors today is Strategic Voters, a new podcast that features election experts, political campaign strategists, and everyday Americans who sit down and discuss the biggest issues in the U.S. political landscape. On the activism side, Strategic Voters as an organization aims to encourage people to vote with the benefit of the country as a whole in mind, instead of just voting one party down the ballot. If you want to hear some really different and interesting opinions and approaches to voting and viewing policies, give the Strategic Voters podcast a listen. The latest 2 episodes feature Rachel Cobb and Lana Atkinson as guests. I've been listening to it myself. I've been really enjoying it. It's very grassroots and independent, which I love. Find the Strategic Voters podcast on all major podcast platforms and make sure to follow them on Twitter at Strategic Voters. The David Pakman Show is mostly funded by viewers and listeners like you. We don't have a money tree. We don't have big corporate sponsors lavishing us with gifts and cash. We mostly depend on people who just grab a membership at joinpakman.com. We do an extra show every day for those members. You can sign up using the coupon code BETTER21 if you like. If you prefer Patreon, you can also sign up at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. I would encourage you to join the discussion on the David Pakman Show subreddit. We are just so close to 30,000 of our viewers and listeners being subscribed to the subreddit. Find it at davidpakman.com/Reddit. Some interesting posts from this morning. One article lets us know that creationism can be taught as science in Arkansas classrooms, according to what lawmakers there are saying. And indeed, it is horrifying. House Bill 1701 has passed the House in Arkansas, which will allow the teaching of creationism as science for kindergarten through 12th grade. Kindergarten through 12th grade, not in religious studies, mind you, as science. It now goes to the Senate. I don't know if it will pass the Senate, but this is very, very ugly. We talk about education on the program quite a bit, and I point out that while it would be great to deal with some elements of the educational problems federally, in the United States, much of education is decided at the state level by state boards of education. And this is one such example. It's absolutely horrible. We will see what the Senate does, state Senate in Arkansas, but at least the state House saying, yeah, creationism, that belongs in science class, which is a horrifying situation. Another post on the subreddit about the latest police shooting says, in the Army, there's no such thing as an accidental discharge. There are only negligent discharges, saying the Army is very lenient when it comes to mistakes made in the heat of the moment. But if a soldier failed to do his or her duty by ensuring they employed the correct weapon, and that negligence resulted in a death, the soldier would be facing non-judicial punishment as a bare minimum, but likely a court-martial. That soldier's supervisor would also be held accountable. Why aren't cops held to the same standard? Well, understand, as is pointed out in the thread, that there are ways in which the military actually has higher standards than domestic U.S.-based police forces. And this often relates to use of force. But yeah, as I said earlier this week, I believe from the video that the officer in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, did not intend to shoot the victim. But that doesn't make it an accident where we say, let's just walk away from this thing. It was an accident. It's negligence when, as an officer, you as a police officer, you don't need to know much about, for example, astrophysics, but you do need to know whether you've got the taser or the gun. That seems like a fundamental part of policing. She has been charged now with second-degree manslaughter, and we'll talk about that more on the bonus show and see what that is likely going to look like. One other thing, Bread for All, user Bread for All posted, does David Deepak Pakman the First of the David Pakman Show on YouTube and elsewhere actually have a middle name? I do not. And what distinguishes me from the other David Pakman, the venture capitalist who we've had on the show, is he has a middle name. He has a middle name, and I do not. But no, I have no middle name, and I want to be publicly fully known that that is the case. Okay, join the discussion, whether it's about police shootings or my middle name. It's all valid on the subreddit, which you can find at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. This is super interesting and very much worth spending some time on today. There is a guy named Alex Berenson. Alex Berenson is not a doctor, but has been front and center throughout the pandemic, making tons of claims about the virus, about the pandemic itself, about containment guidelines, about masks, vaccination, the spread of the virus. He has been wrong on essentially everything. There is a very good article you can read about him in The Atlantic called The Pandemic's Wrongest Man. Just some of his greatest hits include blaming vaccines for more coronavirus cases, suppressing the immune system, saying Israel suffered from being early to vaccinate, that the vaccine side effects are worse than COVID itself for anybody other than seniors. I could go on and on. I mean, he's just been wrong about everything. I can't think of anybody who's been this wrong. Maybe Trump, right? But it just weaponized wrongness is what I would call it. He is also a big anti-cannabis guy, very much against marijuana. He's even written books about how bad marijuana is. The books are trash. They're filled with anecdotes and cherry-picked so-called data. So yesterday, Alex Berenson goes on Tucker Carlson. I guess Tucker has a new daytime show. It's a second show called Tucker Carlson Today. You can distinguish the shows because on his nighttime show, Tucker's wearing a tie. On his daytime show, Tucker is not wearing a tie. I watched a 2-minute clip, Tucker and Alex Berenson talking about cannabis. I was actually stunned at how much incorrect information is squeezed into such a short period of time. There must be some record here for falsehoods per minute. Let's just jump right into it and start seeing if we can understand what's going on.
Community will acknowledge that cannabis can cause a fair number of people, especially if you use heavily, to have kind of short-term psychotic reactions, right? A bad trip.
But they're peaceful, though, because marijuana makes you peaceful.
Yeah.
It's the Mahatma Gandhi drug.
That's right. That's why violence has gone down so much in the United States in the last 5 years.
Okay, so you heard Berenson there sarcastically say, if marijuana made people mellow and docile, violent crime has gone down the last 5 years, huh? Implying violent crime is actually up over the last 5 years. Now, there is a reason he says in the last 5 years, because crime in the United States, big picture, has been on the decline for a really long time. If you look at FBI data for violent crimes per 100,000 people, violent victimizations per 1,000 people age 12 or over, property crimes per 100,000 people, property victimizations per 1,000 households, they have all been down over the last 28 years or longer. Now, it is true that with some indicators, the decline sort of slowed down, maybe even went up and then back down over the last 5 to 7 years. It's been a less steady trend. Alex Berenson apparently wants you to think that because of marijuana law, crime is now going up because marijuana does not actually make people docile, it makes people violent. Every aspect of this claim is wrong. First, there's no evidence that marijuana makes people violent. Second, we started seeing decriminalization of cannabis in 1973, medical cannabis legalization in 1996, recreational cannabis legalization in 2012. That's already 9 years ago. So even the timeline, he implies a causality for which there's no evidence, and he also points to a timeline that doesn't actually correlate with cannabis law. Violent crime has been declining. The up and down period doesn't correlate with cannabis law changes. It's just vapid. Let's watch a little bit more of this.
So you think that there is, I'm just being completely honest. I grew up in Southern California. I smoked marijuana as a child. Everyone I knew believed that it mellowed you out. So you're saying there's evidence of the opposite.
Oh yeah, there's something called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Okay, what that basically means is uncontrolled vomiting as a result of THC use.
Yes, I've seen
now,
that.
Cannabis is supposed to settle your stomach. If you're nauseated, smoke some, right? That was sort of one of the famous uses of it.
Of course.
For chemotherapy.
For chemo patients.
That's right. But it looks like there's this paradoxical effect if you use too much of it, that for whatever reason somehow it resets the receptors in the brain for some people, and they have this just terrible uncontrolled vomiting that in some cases can actually kill. I'm not exaggerating, because you become so dehydrated, it can kill you if you're not careful, if you don't get to an emergency room.
Okay, now did you see what he did there? First, he says there's this thing called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, where super high intake of THC in some people could cause uncontrolled vomiting. Now, that part is true. That exists. And with countless substances, medications, you can have one effect at a normal dose and the opposite effect at a cartoonishly high dose. There's no question of that. That's not specific to THC. It's insanely rare with THC, but it is not exclusive to THC. Then he says, well, it can kill you if you become super dehydrated from the vomiting and you don't go to a hospital and deal with the dehydration. We're no longer talking about cannabis. So understand the game that he's playing here. Anything that causes you to become dehydrated, if you don't deal with the dehydration, you could die. And if you are uncontrollably vomiting for a long time, then you should be going to the hospital, regardless of whether it's as a result of extremely cartoonishly high THC intake. So he mixes something that could happen to someone who consumes an insane amount of THC, but then he's admitting the risk isn't actually from the cannabis. It's anything that causes uncontrollable vomiting and subsequent dehydration. It could be a stomach bug, could be food poisoning, could be for a whole bunch of other reasons. He's sort of slick, but it doesn't take very long to see through the nonsense. Let's just watch a little bit more.
So paradoxically, so in the short term, marijuana can reduce anxiety, certainly, and it can get you high. But like most anti-anxiety drugs, you can have bad rebound anxiety if you try to quit. I mean, that's true of benzodiazepines too. That's a known risk, okay?
Yes.
Further, cannabis has this effect on people where it makes them paranoid. Some people, some of the time, okay? And if you have this predisposition or if you're sliding into mental illness and you start smoking a lot, you may sort of temporarily muffle that anxiety at the cost of your paranoid symptoms getting worse.
Okay, so again, now he's talking about some people get side effects that are rare and may be counterproductive to what you're trying to treat. You might take cannabis for anxiety and it makes you paranoid, which then makes you more anxious. Yeah, that's true. This is the case with SSRIs for depression and anxiety, which in some people, short-term, medium-term, you take an SSRI for anxiety, it might cause anxiety. You take it for depression, it could make your depression worse. This is not new. It's not unique to cannabis. So if you actually go through it, it's a worthless segment. There is nothing of substantive value here. And increasingly, the right is holding up Alex Berenson as some kind of brilliant truth teller who we should listen to because everybody else is lying to us. But Alex Berenson is telling us the truth. Increasingly a dangerous guy and increasingly being held up as a hero by right-wing media. We'll have more about this on the show's Instagram page. Make sure you're following us there at David Pakman Show. And you can follow me on Instagram at david.pakman. When you see me sitting here at the microphone, oftentimes I'm wearing a shirt by a company called Teddy Stratford. And I love these shirts so much that I asked Teddy Stratford to be a sponsor of the show. And here's why I like their shirts so much. With other slim fit button-up shirts, you often get this weird looking gap between the buttons where it looks kind of stretched out. But Teddy Stratford actually has a patented zipper that's hidden underneath the buttons, which secures the shirt against your chest so it doesn't look stretched. And most importantly, it just provides a nicer looking fit overall. And the entire shirt is specially designed to really improve the way your upper body looks when you're wearing it. It also has a special type of collar that prevents it from drooping down and spreading open, which is another really great thing about these shirts. All of these things really do a lot to make a big difference when you're looking at a shirt. And that's why I like to wear Teddy Stratford shirts on the show. Go check them out at davidpakman.com/Teddy. The link is in the podcast notes, and they'll give you 15% off your first order if you use the coupon code PAKMAN at checkout. That's PAKMAN. One of our sponsors is Privacy.com. They're giving you $5 when you sign up for their completely free service at Privacy.com/Pakman. I've been using Privacy for a little over a year now. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a lifesaver, and here's how it works. Takes just a couple of minutes to set up. Anytime you buy something online or on the phone, instead of actually using your real credit card number, the privacy app and the browser plugin let you give each company a randomized virtual credit card number that you create out of thin air. It'll even autofill the card number with one click. And the payment is taken out of your checking account without the merchant ever knowing your real information. So this allows you to keep your banking information secure, but also to take control of your finances. You can create up to 12 of these virtual credit cards a month. You can set spending limits. You can freeze them. You can delete them anytime you want. So when you do this, it means you're not going to be charged when you don't want to be, because you can destroy the virtual card number right after using it, which, for instance, I love using free trials because I know I won't be charged when the trial is over if I use a virtual credit card number. You're keeping your identity private by not telling companies who you are. You're keeping your bank or credit card info protected against data breaches and identity theft, and it's free. And like I said, you'll get $5 to spend when you sign up at privacy.com/Pakman. You can find the link in the podcast notes. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Professor Catherine Liu, who teaches at University of California, Irvine, and is also author of the new book, Virtue Hoarders, The Case Against the Professional Managerial Class. It's so great to have you on today.
Thank you, David.
So there's certainly a narrative I think much of my audience will be familiar with that is often used in some populist circles about elites and non-elites, or an overclass and an underclass. And one of the things your book does that's interesting is you're sort of focusing in on a specific slice that's smaller than such a simple division, the managerial class, professional managerial class. Let's start there. What is that? Who's included in it, et cetera?
So the professional managerial class is an intermediary class. A lot of classic Marxists call it the petit bourgeois because it's located between the working class, which is the mass of people without college degrees now in late capitalism in America, and the capitalists. So this class, uniquely though in the United States, has become really, really important, exports one of the most important American creations of the post-war period, the meritocracy. And it basically does the bidding of capitalism and the capitalist by producing, now we think of it as content and ideological content to justify the really staggering levels of inequality and exploitation that keep capitalism going. So this class are college-educated, white-collar workers who, I like to say, do jobs that don't entail physical damage to their bodies. Now, they could actually damage themselves psychologically and intellectually, which I think is actually the case, but what they do is reproduce the ideology of the class system to make it seem like it's justified that rich people are rich, and it's justified that the masses are poor, and that there are no universal programs that would actually create a more equitable society. Now, this is to say, though, in 1977, when John and Barbara Ehrenreich wrote about this class has taken over left and progressive liberal organizing spaces. So it thinks of itself as being on the side of progress, right, and virtuous and good. But actually, its actions serve only to reproduce the interests of capitalism.
Yeah, this is it. So I think many in the audience may realize that when you tell me, is it correct to call this a Marxist perspective?
Yes.
Yeah. As a non-Marxist myself, I still think that the analysis has a lot of very interesting things that are accurate. And one of the things I was thinking of during the rise of the Tea Party in 2010 was that a lot of the people that were supporting the Tea Party, they were definitely never going to benefit from much of what the Tea Party was advocating for. Like, it wasn't even there was a chance they would benefit. Statistically, they just weren't going to benefit. What I think is interesting about the managerial class that you're talking about is that they actually, to some degree, could benefit from the propping up of the actual overclass that you describe. And so there actually seems to be, if you want to talk about rationality, it actually seems more rational to me that they would prop that system up, whereas it made less sense with the Tea Party people.
But, I think the Tea Party people and populists, about which I've written in the past, are animated by a rage against the economic system that's left them marginalized. But what they support were free markets, but also the traditional values, and they hated the liberal elites, right?
Yes.
Because they thought the liberal elites had created the crisis in which they found themselves, and they're not wrong.
Right.
You know, a lot of them were not college educated people. They were small business people, or we'd say like craftsmen, or there was like the classic Joe the plumber who turned out to be a fake. But this population in America, which I would say are non-college educated people, after World War II, were really copiously rewarded by the redistribution of wealth that was put into place by both Republican and Democratic administrations after 1945. But since 1972, as you know, the middle and the working classes have seen their wages stagnate, actually go down. We've seen the social safety net be destroyed. And so a lot of the actual economic damage that people suffered from in the Tea Party setting, and I would say also in Trump supporters, had to do with the imposition of this kind of neoliberal austerity politics and actually free markets that were engineered by economists, academics, and elites after 1972 of both parties, right? So what they wanted in the Tea Party was less government, because they thought the government had created, the financial crisis, and the government did participate in creating the financial crisis, but it was Wall Street and financiers, as you know, who really produced this crisis in capital that destroyed $1 trillion in American assets, like overnight. And there was this fantasy that the Tea Party had, that it was people borrowing with bad credit who overspent, and they were to blame, and somehow the government and the bank and some banks participated in that. I heard this line repeated to me by a very wealthy liberal who said, what caused this crisis? All those people couldn't afford the houses, and everyone wants a flat screen TV. So in fact, she's actually being more rational, although wrong, because it was actually Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and AIG that had created the crisis. The credit default swap created the crisis. But there's this idea that there are these poor people over-consuming who had bad credit, and they brought the world economy to its knees. And so the Tea Party had that idea, and they were like all mad on Fox News, but also MSNBC, CNN watching elite liberals had that same idea. So there's actually this consensus about how poor people caused the financial crisis that Tea Partiers and liberal elites shared, PMC liberal elites shared. And
yeah,
so
I don't know if this is I don't know if this is analog or part of or parallel to your analysis, but to some degree what I'm hearing you say about the Tea Party and then also some on the left is similar to, I use the term bamboozling, but there's probably a different term that could be used, that the populist rhetoric has succeeded with over the last many years, where it pulls in people from both left and right with what are typically different voting patterns and stated values that would differ. But the rhetoric starts to sound similar on the left and right, but then the solutions don't match up when you actually ask people, well, how would you solve this problem?
But there's a similar level of irrationality. And what I think is really insane is that the professional managerial classes have always prided themselves on being rational and being reasonable. They're located in the university. They all went to fancy universities and have credentials, but they are utterly irrational right now. And I think that the Russiagate thing is a really good example of their irrationality. Like, what happened to that? But nobody's supposed to not trust MSNBC after they made that whole kerfuffle about something that that they had no proof for. So that's something that's in the book too, is how I show the PMC elites now do not abide by the high liberal values of either due process or reason, rational argument in the public sphere. And, certainly on the right, people do not believe in reason and rational argument in the public sphere either. So the state of our politics today has it finds ourselves in this position where nobody wants to defend argument, reasonable people debating each other, not agreeing with each other. And the PMC liberals like to blame this on Fox News and blame this on extreme right forces, but they are policing their own boundaries in the same exact way. And they're demonizing their antagonists to make them seem like they really don't deserve to even exist or vote and then they say the Republicans want to suppress the vote. But I think that there's a lot of contempt for non-college educated Americans, working class Americans, that's actually in the PMC itself.
Yeah, the part that is less clear to me is the Russiagate piece, because it seems to me that certainly there were some people who very early on were setting expectations that were unreasonable, like Trump's going to be caught on video planning something with Putin. That was never going to happen. Trump's going to end up in prison. That was never going to happen. You go back to my videos from April of 2017, and that's what I said all along. But in great part, I don't see, maybe MSNBC was doing different things than I saw. I don't really watch any MSNBC or that type of stuff. But from the perspective of this led to not only more than a dozen indictments, but it actually found enough wrongdoing to recover more money than the investigation cost. It is very clear that Donald Trump was a useful idiot in a number of different ways, and part of it did overlap with. I don't know that I see that as the same thing that you see it as necessarily.
Okay, well, that is a very reasonable take, and I totally appreciate that. What I'm talking about more, I guess, is the energy of condemnation that they were sure was going to lead to an impeachment.
I see.
And it works only partially, but it's so different. I was alive you're probably too young to remember Watergate, when there was bipartisan condemnation of Nixon, when the work was done to bring in the Republicans and say something so bad has happened, something so illegal has happened that we have to condemn this person. And the Russiagate thing did find wrongdoing, but it didn't actually create, because our politics are so polarized now, a national consensus.
But I think that's an indictment of the Republican Party. I think because when I see, there was a point in Watergate where the reason there was not impeachment was because it became clear that Nixon was going down if it went that far, because Republicans, I think that the reason it went the way it did is an indictment on Republicans.
No, I absolutely agree. But I also think there's the core, an irrational core, if you like, of Republican support, popular support for Trump, or right-wing popular support for Trump, that is animated by hatred of the professional managerial class. And the more you have these liberal talking heads, pumping people up about cultural issues, ignoring actual bread and butter economic issues or the suffering of the majority of Americans, the more you will have this label of hypocrisy being thrown at liberal elites. And this idea also that there are worthy people to help and unworthy people to help, that is usually a Republican and right-wing talking point, but the liberal elite, PMC, has actually done this completely. Like, there are good poor people and there are bad working class people, and we're going to give all of the moral iniquity to the other side. Well, and they do not see their complicity in actually bringing us to a state where the country is so polarized and so divided and animated by these class antagonisms and hatreds that should be talked about rationally. They can't do that, though, because that would mean that they were not saintly in some way. I think the PMC has tried to cloak itself in a kind of saintly identity that always has to put itself on the right side of things. Let's look at the state of California. We have an incredible homeless problem that is in large part generated by regulations on housing and land use in the state. The PMC here in the state, though, they rule, right? The Democratic elites have supermajorities and everything in every legislative branch in this state, and yet they can only put up Black Lives Matters signs in their yards, and they refuse to have lower income housing built in their neighborhoods, or homeless shelters built in their neighborhoods, or even create higher density housing so that we're not living in suburban enclave, suburban hell.
Right.
This state with its veneer of liberalism and its preachiness about tolerance, has actually created this kind of dystopia of inequality that they don't really actually want to solve. Look at the San Francisco School Board. They stopped this now, but rather than asking for funding to get schools open in the correct way, supporting teachers and students, they wanted to rename San Francisco public schools, 44 of them, one of them named after Abraham Lincoln because of the racism of the past.
Right.
To me, that just infuriates me so much because, first of all, like I don't like Dianne Feinstein. I don't think she should have a school name but after her. But if you just go after these cosmetic things and then you say like people who are from the past, like Lincoln, were racist, what the PMC there is saying is, everyone who came before us are racist. We're enlightened, and we're going to create a cosmetic, superficial veneer of tolerance and anti-racism, ignoring all of the structural economic inequalities that has made the San Francisco school system majority minority, right? African American, Latinos, and Asian American working class people use that public school system. The wealthy elites of all, they're mostly white, but some of them Asian, some of them African American, some of them Latino, they send their kids to private schools. And this is what has happened in every city in the country, is this kind of lip service to public education and this undermining of public goods so that the upper tier of the PMC can enjoy privatized